Hey guys. Here is what if Naruto became a war commander. A home, a wife, a child. Despite serving in a decade-long conflict, Naruto has carved out his own piece of happiness. Yet, when the Godaime gives him an order he can't refuse and makes him a leader of men, the balance between his family and old dreams threatens to be upended. The crucible of war is harsh, and in grass a Hokage is forged. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start.
We are pain, that's all. We are God.
Chapter 1. They are coming, sir. Bad words, and a horrible start to the day. I had every reason to keep my eyes closed against the early morning chill and bury myself farther into my Jonin vest. A few more seconds, that was all I asked for. Sir? Sir! The voice broke into my dream landscape, echoing from the sky as I sat lounging in an oversized noodle bowl. Someone was shaking my shoulder. I stirred with a grumble and turned onto my back. The face of a Chunin greeted me. She had pretty eyes, a rare shade of amber, but the tense lines around them betrayed her worry. I disliked anxiety in the morning hours, and Izuna was overflowing with it, more so than her master Sakura had ever been. Sir? I heard you, I said, pushing myself up into a sitting position. I'm up. I craned my neck to look up the oak I had been sleeping against, trying to catch some sun with my face. Nothing. Only shadows and a green wall reaching to the sky. I jerked my head back down, grimacing when pain jolted through my body. The QB was still on a strike. I had come to expect nothing less. Rising to my feet in an awkward stumble, I wished myself back into my dream. Nothing happened, no return to that sweet world. No way around it then. When duty called, you had to answer. Those were the rules now. And that, so it had been made clear to me, counted double during wartime. Izuna was tapping her index finger against her thigh, looking around nervously. Report, I said, wiping the sleep out of my eyes. At the command, her back became straight as a board. Subaru has sighted the target to the north, 6 carts, guarded by 9 IWA. Nothing unusual stood out about them. How long do we have? They are approximately half an hour away. I could have slept a good 10 minutes longer then. But that was a newbie for you, with nerves coming through when you least needed them. Izuna was skilled, certainly more than I had been at 15, but the brass decision to fast-track her was ridiculous. This wasn't a field trip. The silence betrayed me, and she looked at her feet. Great. Hinata was right. I became far too grouchy when I didn't get my 7 hours. Izuna would learn in time, though. I just had to make sure she survived until then. I gave her an encouraging smile, albeit a tired one. Wake the others and tell them to get ready. 1 convo left, then we can get the hell away from this place. I'll make sure we get the best food camp has to offer once we're back. You better believe it. Izuna took some cheer from that, saluted, and went to fulfill her orders. I gave her 5 minutes tops, then her anxiety would come back, worse than before. I was a little twitchy as well, though. You never really got used to setting ambushes neck-deep in enemy territory. Still, things were looking good. So far we had gone 3 for 3 in terms of raided convoys, and I hadn't lost a single shinobi of the 7 under my command. I couldn't wait to get back, though. If this mission proved a success, I'd have all the arguments lined up to get myself 2 weeks of leave. I'd be away from this damp forest in Fawn Country, and back in Konoha in time for the birth of my daughter. Yawning, I gave the swirl-shaped pendant around my neck a squeeze. Hinata had painted red and white, like my favorite topping, and coincidentally, also the Hokage's hat. I let the pendant fall back into place. Feared squad leader, my sweet Tushy. Hinata had made such a sap out of me, it was a miracle I didn't cut myself on my own kunai when I thought of her and the little one. I shrugged into my vest, ignoring the pain in my shoulder. Around me, the squad was rising, shimmying into their mesh shirts, searching their knives and tantos for nicks and imbalances. At length they assembled in a line, Shikamaru at the far right, waiting for me to give them the rundown once more. A few months ago, Shikamaru had still held these kind of meetings, while I listened and looked important. Jiraiya had made it clear, though, that a Hokage had to speak, and speak well, in front of others. You could talk like a normal person most of the time, but eventually you'd have to pull out the big sentences to make people feel all. Writing down speeches was supposed to make giving them easier, but that was the one advice I wouldn't take. The written word and I weren't the best of friends. Taking over Shikamaru's talks was my way of easing into the whole speech thing. I told my shinobi I would pose asleep near the river, a Konohanin who thought he could rest up in peace and drink the horrifying images of his mission away. I'd fight back against the sudden attack, then lure the lot of them away on a wild goose chase through the forest. IWA dense bastards that they were, could never resist a defenseless man from Konoha. Once they had weakened their forces around the carts, Shikamaru and the squad would swoop in to destroy the supplies, then give the signal and make for the hills. Once I saw the signal, I'd do likewise. A nice speedy goodbye, after which I'd have Izuna patch me up as best she could. I expected the same eagerness and anticipation they had shown me every other time. Today, though, I panned my gaze along a row of concerned expressions. I said, "I thought you'd love the idea of getting out of here. Show some spirit, guys. We're almost done with Fong." The Chunin looked away. Only Shikamaru and the third and last Jonin were returning my gaze. They exchanged a glance, then Shikamaru stepped forward. The years of war had left deep marks on his face. Stress had etched in most of them, but one, running from his chin along his throat, was a gift from a Kumonin. His eyes were dark and beady, flashing with cunning and seeing right through you. In those traps you never wanted to be the mouse. He cleared his throat. I was about to become the mouse. "It has nothing to do with a lack of spirit," he said. "We're all happy this mission will end soon." "What's the problem, then? Thought of a better plan? We've only got a little time left, but if you speak fast enough, maybe we can wing it." I shot all of them a cheesy grin, trying to ease the tension. The Chunin looked guilty. I didn't like that very much. "The plan is fine," Shikamaru said. "But I think I speak for all of us when I say that we'd be much more at ease if you sat this one out. Let someone else be the bait for once." "Ah, that again. Well, that wouldn't happen. Come on, Shikamaru. We've been over this. I'm the most suited for the role." I was, not just strength-wise but also in terms of speed. That we had lost no one so far was owed in large part to the fact that I usually drew the attention of every enemy onto me. After over a decade of service, half of those years spent as a team leader, I hadn't lost a single shinobi under my command. Not unlike Kakashi, who, even years after his death, still held the highest record of team members making it back home alive. I was getting up there, though, and that was nothing to sneeze at. Such numbers couldn't be argued with, even if Shikamaru still tried it now and then. I got that he only was concerned about me, but the outcome of this attempt would be the same as every other time. "Maybe you are the most suited," Shikamaru said. "But you're also injured, and have been for a while now. We have several people here who can play that part just as well. People that were assigned your squad for a reason." "He's right, sir." Haru, the Jonin next to him, spoke up. He had a sharp, pointed nose that looked like an arrowhead lodged in the middle of his face. "I'm not as fast as you, granted, but I can give them a good run for their money. Give me the chance, and I'll prove it to you." The Chunin chose that moment to find their courage, nodding cautiously in agreement. I actually felt insulted. As if a few injuries were enough to hold me back. "I'm not brittle enough to fall apart after a few injuries, guys." I swept my gaze along the line and made eye contact with each and every one of them. None of them had sustained a crippling injury. That was all the reassurance I needed. The method worked. "We'll do it the old way. Get to your positions. They'll be here soon." At the direct order, they vanished into the trees, becoming mere shadows in the mist-wreathed forest around us. All but Shikamaru, who kept standing in front of me, his arms crossed. The stance of disapproval was so familiar, I expected long blonde hair to sprout from the back of his head any second now. "This is a mistake," he said. My lack of sleep must have really made me look tired. I loved Shikamaru like a brother, but these past weeks he had been clucking about like a mother hen. A sting shot through my arm when I waved his concern away. "You know I don't die easily. In a few days all my injuries will be gone. Why not give it a few days then? There's no harm in that." I rolled my eyes. "I don't need rest. I'm still fully functional." He let out an explosive breath. "Sometimes you're such a bothersome blockhead, Naruto. Think of Hinata and—" "Stop it," I said, whiskers twitching. "Call me a blockhead all you want, but leave my family out of this." Shikamaru paused. "You're right, I'm sorry. But why can't you listen to my advice on this one? You're running yourself into the ground. And you're fooling nobody when you say you're on top of your game right now." "I'm still fit enough to do the job, though," I said. "Fit enough to ensure my team's not in danger anyway." "Maybe. But they won't always have you around to protect them." I gave a frustrated shrug. "This isn't a training camp, Shikamaru. As long as I'm their squad leader, I won't lose a single one of them. That's a promise. Everyone gets to go home." "Everyone but you?" The question was asked so earnestly, it stopped me in my tracks as I was about to make another argument for my case. Shikamaru had abandoned the frustrated stance, leaving behind nothing but weariness. He looked defeated, and that smarted more than I cared to admit. Was he that concerned? I had dealt with so much indifference as a kid. Even after all these years I found it strange for people to feel so strongly about me. Listen, I said with a sigh. I'll stay as bait. But if it makes you feel any better, I'm taking Haru along for the ride. A Jonin escort for me should put you at ease, right? It would, he said. The relief on his face made me uncomfortable. Send him down, then, I said. We haven't got much time left. While Shikamaru joined the squad in the treetops, I took a swig from the bottle of sake that was to be my prop. I had a group of IWAnin waiting to be robbed. I wouldn't want to disappoint them. Wet grass pressed through my poncho. I was lying next to Haru on the bank of a river meandering through the clearing. Thick mist was curling on the water. Perching on the trees across the river, my squad would be sitting to observe it all. Or rather they would look to Subaru, whose Byakugan was the only thing that could see me through the mist. He was a strange cookie, that branch Hyuga. Long hair tied back in the way of his clan, but the rest of him a much darker complexion since he'd been stationed in Wind Country for years. He was as unreadable and stern as the rest of his family, yet the desert had also seen him picking up some kind of shamanism. What would the mighty Hyuga clan say when he came home after all these years, dark as sunbaked clay, with little bones woven into his hair? The more prim and proper Hyuga would probably burst a blood vessel. I'd pay good money for that kind of entertainment. The earthen smell and bird song around us would have been idyllic if my back weren't soaking through like a towel thrown into a puddle. Slinking around wet to the bone was a bad way to spend the summer, but at least the sake kept me warm. Want some? I sat up, reaching Haru the bottle. Haru shook his head. He was tense. One more, I said, taking another swig. That's all we need. Then it's back home. How old are your kids now? 7 and 3, he said. 7, huh? That's the girl, right? She's about to enter the academy then. They lowered the age to 5. Haru stopped looking around the clearing. She's been a student for 2 years already. Our backyard is full of wooden shuriken and kunai. They're only allowed steel in their 3rd year. I bet she can't wait for that. Steel's the real deal. We got nothing on that cold feel of a real brace of shuriken between your fingers. Haru's lips curved into a smile. True. And she's got it in her head that she'll be a genjutsu expert. Not ninjutsu like her father? Is your wife good at genjutsu? Passable, I'd say. But Kurenai is a friend of hers, and she visits us whenever she gets some leave. That would explain it, I mused, leaning back. I never got into genjutsu. I just don't have that kind of control. Which is a damn shame, sir, if you don't mind me saying so. The area you could cover with those reserves is staggering. Putting a whole town under wouldn't be a stretch, I think. I shrugged. I was about to say that I had made peace with my inability at genjutsu a long time ago, when the rumbling of carts became noticeable. Soon after came the voices. Iwa sure wasn't hiding its presence. I climbed to my feet, pulling up Haru with me. Did you just call my wife ugly? I shouted, waving the bottle around. Haru looked uncomfortable at the situation I had put him in. I grinned, teasing the courage into him. I never would, he said, raising his voice. I called her daft for marrying a chump. Who'd want to cook for you? Ouch. He was getting into it. Well, you won't have to worry about anyone cooking for you once my fist finds your face, dumbass. Yeah? I'd like to see you try YouTube it. You too, stop it. Haru and I turned to the IWAnin, the leaf of Konoha proudly displayed on the Hittite around our foreheads. Shit, I said, hurling the bow right at the first one's head. As it shattered, I flipped off the rest of them. Today's your lucky day. But don't you go and feel safe now. If we meet again, we'll have ourselves a grand party, you hear me? Their confusion was a memory to be treasured. When they jumped at us, we leapt away, straight into the mist. My feet feathered across the river, then I was off towards solid ground once more. I leapt again, this time onto a branch, with Haru right beside me. The chase was on. I didn't know how many were coming along for the ride, but it sounded like more than 4 at least, which would have had the group around the carts. Shikamaru should encounter no trouble cleaning them up. At the whir of shuriken, I ducked my head and hurried on. The projectiles missed their mark, biting into the bark near me. More followed. I dodged around the branches, swinging myself down to another height before shooting off again, ignoring the discomfort in my shoulder and arm. I always kept an eye on Haru, but he was fine, deflecting and dodging as needed. An incoming hail of pebbles tried hurting us to the right, but I had been fighting IWAnin for too long now to fall for that trick. Brace! I called out, barreling with Haru right through the hail. A moment later, A boulder the size of a trash can hurtled past us, right at where we would have been had we tried to avoid the stony rain. Sometimes, IWANEN were really too easy. The thought amused me until the more careful part of me called me a fool in Kakashi's voice. Too easy wasn't good, not in these parts. I reached for a kunai from my leg holster and swiped at a host of saban before they could shave off my whiskers. As the saban fell to the ground, it hit me. The attacks were lukewarm. Just enough to keep us going, but with barely any effort put into them. Shikamaru usually worked fast, and we were already 4 minutes away from the clearing. He should have given the signal by now, and the sudden silence in the forest was eerie. Not even a bird plucked up the courage to interrupt it. I stopped, cracking the branch under my feet. Haru! Too late. Haru hurtled past me, toward the ground, a red-wreathed shadow following him. I leapt after them, the hairs on my neck like vipers. My body had felt it earlier than my mind could process it. The potent miasma of chakra that had hit Haru set my teeth on edge. The essence of it was as familiar to me as my own. Haru lay prone on the ground, dazed by the blow. I blasted myself forward with wind chakra, barely overtaking the shadow before it reached him. I had no time to get into a better position. The force of the punch fell right onto my injured arm, cracking it. I bit down a curse while the attacker leapt back into the mist. I wouldn't play that kind of game. I called more wind, blowing away the mist in every direction, and found him standing in between the trees, looking at us. He was built like a brick house, his arms covered in tattoos. His lips twitched between his scraggly red beard. Are you all right? I asked Haru, but no answer came. Haru? That first monstrous blow had knocked him out cold. I couldn't blame him, given that it had been right to the head, but it made this far more difficult. Now there were other presences as well, sitting in the trees north of us. 6, maybe 7 people, though none of them resembled the signatures I had felt pursuing us earlier. I narrowed my eyes at the Jinchuriki. The skill needed to create clones that couldn't be detected by a Byakugan was staggering. I couldn't do it. I was able to fool Jiraiya and Tsunade, but Hinata always knew whether I was real or not. Out of habit I had left behind some clones on the chase, though, hidden as animals and branches. They were to assist my squad if necessary, but I needed them more now. I summoned a new clone with mental orders that came alive as a stone under my heel, and squashed it. Time was everything. I had to make do until Shikamaru got here to take Haru off my hands and keep the other IWANEN busy. Maybe that guy would leave us the hell alone if all his friends were out of the picture. First, then, manners. The wife was particular about those. Can I at least have your name before we smash each other's faces? I don't see my face getting touched here, boy. He was calm and solid as rock, his brow raised in challenge. The same can't be said about your friend there. That sentence alone was more than enough reason to have earned himself a good hiding. He'd also called me boy though, and I'd pay him back gladly for that. Later. Once Haru was out of danger. Say what you want, old man, but since we're both, you know, of the same kind, I thought it'd be nice to be polite. Stalling, huh? He shrugged. Doesn't matter. You go first. He had seen right through me. Although, to be fair, I hadn't tried to hide it. That he was still playing along was a problem wholly of its own. Uzumaki Naruto. I returned, more wary now, even as my clones took up positions south, west, and east of us. Rashi of the Lava Mountain. Admittedly, the title got that certain something. Fancy name that. Now, Rashi, it's been fun talking to you. Have a nice day. The first blade of wind slammed into him. The next cut through the mist from another direction. Then followed a third, and a fourth, and ever more until the screeching wind filled the entire forest. Blade after blade was shearing through the trees and greenery, cutting off branches and slicing whole trunks in two. Oaks crashed into one another, struggled, then hit the ground with a threatening rumble. As the first trees fell sideways, shrubbery and branches poured from the sky, blotting out my vision. Shadows leapt between the falling trees, trying to find steadier footing. The chaos had rooted out his allies as well. I used the confusion to make my escape with Haru slung over my shoulder. There was no way this would have been enough to lay out Rashi, but that hadn't been my aim anyway. This whole thing looked like a trap for me, and not like a supply convoy quick on the uptake. Besides, I had never faced off with another Jinchuriki before. I planned to keep it that way. I didn't know what would happen if we actually got into the thick of things. Would I be able to keep from using bony claws and swishing tails and the red, toxic cloak of chakra when the fight got too intense? I didn't want to be the first Jinchuriki to violate the Ten-Men Treaty, perhaps the only piece of paper in this world that still held some weight, which was a miracle in itself. I was pushing off another tree when I sensed Rashi right next to me. I turned midair, barely getting Haru out of the way of the blow. Rashi's knuckles hit me like a hammer and anvil, smashing right through my hasty defense and sending me hurling toward the ground. I clutched at Haru, turned, and landed hard on my back, tears jumping to my eyes as the forest floor cratered under me, blasting grass and moss away and leaving nothing but hard earth. Dizzy, I pushed Haru off me and climbed to my feet. I spat out a wad of blood and wiped my mouth with the back of my hand. Rashi was walking toward us, his fists smoking as though he'd use them to brand me like cattle. There was a death-like certainty to his steps that, frankly, pissed me off. I straightened as much as I could under the pain. The wind shifted behind me. Pebbles crunched. Then my team was there, standing and crouching around me, and Haru like protective statues come to life. I had conjured them after all, and grinned my bloodiest grin at Rashi. Say what you want, but the Uzumaki magic worked every time. Good to see you're still alive, Shikamaru said. Agreed, I returned. Though Haru's got the worst of it. Izuna, he's your responsibility now. Subaru, work it. Crouching next to me, the Hyuga raised his hands in a seal. The veins around his eyes popped. 6 shinobi. One of them carries a huge scroll, though he looks like a close combat specialist. The ground under our feet shivered. We leapt aside, Izuna taking Haru, as a fount of lava broke open the floor. Then Rashi was in front of me, fist flying. I leaned to the side, death passing me by, and kicked off from the ground, shooting high into the air and out of reach. Squad, get them! I'll take care of this. Half a second later I was slugging it out with Rashi again. Or rather, he was slugging it, and I did my hardest to keep distance between us. Soon my team would have taken care of things. There was no need to let loose here, even though I really wanted to. I had learned this the hard way, though. Whichever path gave us the highest chance of making it out alive with everyone was the one I'd walk. Rashi drove me relentlessly before him. Where I stepped, he was too, delayed by only a fraction of time. An endless stream of clones rose from the ground, met my own, crumbled as mine puffed away in clouds of smoke. Earthen spears, fiery boulders, lava lances, the projectiles at his command were inexhaustible. I dodged and weaved, switched with my clones, but no matter what I did, Rashi cotoned onto it. For all my craftiness, he had a good 30 years on me, if not more. Decades in which people had been running from him while he hunted them down. He had probably seen every method of escape man ever invented. The problem was that I even had to resort to craftiness instead of brute force, but my arm was nearly unusable and gave me little choice. When I juked left, then switched with a clone, I found his elbow crushing my insides. Half a minute and 20 maneuvers later, his fist struck my face a second time and sent me flying. I was losing, slowly but surely. I had no time to think about the causes, though. I had to keep him away from my team, that was all. As long as Rashi didn't fight them, everything was all right. The forest around us became a wreckage. Fir trees stood on fire, trunks lay scattered and broken, and mounds of earth had welled up where our techniques met. My body was a single bruise. My breath came heavy. Then Shikamaru landed next to me. I was sick to my stomach. He shouldn't be so close. But an enemy shinobi landed next to Rashi, and I took the breather. How are things? I panted. What's with the scroll? 3 down already. We think they've sealed the supplies in that scroll. Their mission was probably to kill us and deliver them afterwards. What a rosy prospect. It made sense, though. The chakra requirement for sealing scrolls scaled with the amount packed into them. Only a Jinchuriki was able to seal supplies from a whole convoy. Which also meant this ambush wasn't planned just for me. If anything, it was a horrible coincidence for Rashi and me to meet. That changed things. For this mission to be successful, I'd have to destroy that damn scroll and the supplies inside. Otherwise I wouldn't get my leave, and neither would my team. There was no way in hell I'd miss out on my daughter's birth. Get back and finish off those guys, I told Shikamaru. Are you? Go! Shikamaru knew better than to argue during a fight. He told me to survive, then left me alone with Rashi, who had strapped the scroll to his back. It was time to go on the offensive. It would be one of the crazier ones, likely to leave Shikamaru a horrified mess were he to see it. Good thing he was busy, I said. Seems like your guys are almost done for. Want to give up? Rashi barked a laugh. I'll just kill all of you before that happens. Done speaking, he ran at me. I matched him pace for pace, and we met right in the middle of this place that had once been a forest, and now was ash and tinder. He swung wide, his fist encased in hardened lava. I ducked under it, pushed forward into his guard, and took a hold of him with both arms. It was like hugging a furnace. Hits rained onto my back. Their repeated impact made my shoulders cry out in protest, while the fabric of my vest burned away, leaving a searing heat on my back as though he was hitting me with a hot poker. I stifled a scream, my hands racing through a seal behind his back. One more second, then the work was done. I let go, and slid down against him to the ground, leaning against his legs. Sheer relief came over me as the heat gave way and the crisp morning air caressed my burnt back. He smashed his fist into me from above, sending me sprawling at his feet like an old doormat, then kicked me away. Every bone in my body was screaming, even more so when I came to a halt and looked up awkwardly from the ground. Rashi was breathing wildly, eyes bugging out. Evidently, he didn't like hugging. And for once in my life I counted myself lucky to be a Jinchuriki. Any normal human would have died from that onslaught. I struggled to my feet, wiping sticky red hair away from my eyes. He would notice at any moment now. Rashi reached behind him. The scroll was gone. While holding tight to his midriff, I had cut the threads to the scroll with a wind technique, before forming a clone to take it away. "Where is it?" he growled. "Scattered," I said, gesturing at the tiny pieces of paper littering the ashen forest floor. "I've never been good at handling valuable writing. Sorry, man. Maybe with some time and spit you can glue it back together?" His chakra flared like a thunderstorm. He looked ready to go Biju on me right there. Then his head swiveled. A moment later, my squad landed next to me, all worse for the wear but alive. Rashi looked at us like an enraged bull, neck muscles bulging, hair windswept and standing on end. He took another long look at me, coal-like eyes shining fiercely, then he was gone. I had a feeling he'd remember my face. I turned to my team. "Is Haru all right?" "He's fine," Izuna said. "Just unconscious." "Good. 2 other things," I said to Shikamaru. He was battered and bruised, but right there to listen. "Yes?" "Get the scroll from my clone. He's hiding somewhere in those bushes over there." At that point, the scattered remains of paper went up in ringlets of smoke as my army of hidden clones puffed away. I was unreasonably pleased that my ruse had worked. Subaru went over to the shrubbery to get the scroll. Shikamaru said. "The second thing?" I was too tired to make a kiss face, so I looked him straight in the eyes and said, "Hold me," before keeling forward, out like a light. It took me a day to wake up for the first time. All I could remember was a bone-deep exhaustion, the soothing voice of a woman, and a gentle swaying, as though I was standing on the deck of a ship. 2 days later, when I woke up again, this time for real, it was on a straw futon, lying on my stomach. Izuna was carefully applying salve to my back, her long, thin fingers bringing relief with every cold touch. If I hadn't been curious about the state of affairs, I might have drifted off toward another day of sleep. She told me that we were back at the main camp. She had carried me all the way from Fong, healing me as much as possible while on the run. It wasn't a trivial task, and I saw why Sakura had taken such a fancy to her. When I said as much, Izuna's fingers paused, then resumed their work with even more diligence. "I hope you don't think me too forward, sir, but I'm glad we're back here and you got to rest. Fong wasn't my idea of a good vacation either," I told her. "Tell the others that from now on until the next mission rolls and I want the whole squad drunk and in a good mood. If I see one sober soul, that'll be latrine duty for the whole team." "I will do that, sir," she said. I could hear the grin in her voice. "Damn right you will. We survived an ambush and took a whole convoy worth of supplies from a Jinchuriki. If that's not worth celebrating, I don't know what is. The brass must be dancing on the tables right now." The moment her hands stopped working their magic, I knew I had said something strange. My voice hardened. "What is it?" Before she could answer, the flap to the tent was pushed aside. Shikamaru stepped inside, clad in black slacks, his jonin vest nowhere to be found. The casual Shikamaru was usually a harbinger of good news. This time, though, he had a pinched look on his face, as if he were about to talk to potential in-laws. "Can you give us a minute?" Shikamaru asked. Izuna's cold hands left my back. I was bemoaning their loss even as I tried figuring out what I had missed. "I was outside and heard about the order you gave," Shikamaru said, pulling over a chair. "I'll make sure they stay drunk. Even Subaru, though that might take some convincing. Stop buttering me up and give it to me straight. What happened?" He leaned back in the chair. "The scroll we took from your clone was a fake. Infused with chakra and with enough scribbles to make it look like an actual seal, even to a Byakugan. So we didn't get the supplies. If there were supplies to begin with, Rashi might have played us. They might have stashed the supplies somewhere else. Or maybe they never existed at all. There are too many variables to say for sure what happened." I lay still as I listened. Outside sounded the rough barter from passing shinobi and the yapping of dogs. I balled my fists. All these injuries for nothing, then. Would they let me go back to Konoha now? Before you start spiraling, you should know that I already made my report, Shikamura said. They didn't care all that much about the supplies. To be frank, they found it miraculous that none of us died, even though we met a Jinchuriki. They're pleased, is what I'm saying. I find that hard to believe. The brass was never pleased. They were always looking for excuses to dock you leave time. None of my missions so far had been perfect, even those that were. Shikamura shrugged. I'm just telling you what they told me. Though you're right that they're probably after something else. Stories are spreading already, again. We told Haru what happened, and naturally he told the rest of the camp. The word is that you single-handedly sent Rashi packing while we kept his posse off you. Some even say that you sent him packing while defending us from his men. I hadn't exactly sent him packing, but I could stomach the added notoriety. I had done it all my life. Does the brass pleasure come with any benefits? Good food. Better quarters. And most importantly, more leave. They're giving us 3 weeks instead of 2. All they ask for is that you check in with the Godaime first, once you're in Konoha. Huh! Can't he just read the report? I'm sure he can, but I'd be surprised if he was asking you there just to talk about the mission. I didn't much like Danzo, but so far he had steered Konoha well enough through these troubled times. 8 years, I think, since Gigi died. On further thought, my dislike for Danzo was solely based on his sinister looks. I had never had much to do with him in a professional manner. Maybe he was a perfectly nice old man who had drawn the shit end of the stick in the facial department. Such things happen sometimes. I was about to share that vital piece of information when Shikamura reached into his pouch and pulled out a book with a grimy cover. What's that? A diary, I suppose, he said. Subaru found it next to the fake scroll. I hadn't been all that precise with my wind technique while fighting Rashi. I had probably cut the book loose on accident. Rashi didn't strike me as the kind to write a diary, I said. It's not his. It belongs to a girl, I think. I haven't read much farther than the first few sentences, though. Why would Rashi keep that? Beats me. The content could be valuable, though. It might give us some clue how to fight him next time. A girl's diary? I doubt it. You want me to give it to an analyst? I haven't shown anyone else yet. I thought you might like to see it first. I shrugged and held out my hand. Shikamura gave me the book and left the tent, saying that he had to make sure everyone stayed drunk, even Subaru. Outside I heard the click of his lighter. I brushed my thumb across the rough leather cover. A diary, huh? It would be the first time in years that I read something besides a mission scroll. A new experience, if nothing else. I cracked open the book to the first page. There were wet stains and also droplets of dried blood. The handwriting looked crude, and was still worlds better than mine. Mom gave me this book to write in and made grandfather promise I could keep it. I don't know how often I will be able to write, though. I don't want to leave the estate, but grandfather forces me to. I hate him. Why do I have to leave Mom when I could live with her? And that because some old man in the mountains is supposed to make me into a strong shinobi. I don't even want to be a strong shinobi. All it brought my family so far has been pain. I'd much rather play with my friends. And I don't think this man knows how to do my hair. Only Mom knows how. I won't trust anyone else with it. I raised my eyebrows. Who wouldn't want to learn how to be a strong shinobi? That girl had some issues, though the wish to stay with her family was certainly easy to understand. I turned the page for the next entries. I hate grandfather. He is adamant that I go. He says I exist only because Mom was too weak to defend herself on a mission. Does that mean I'm a mistake? He hugged me when I asked him. I never know what is going on with him. Grandfather is a strange old man. My new teacher is called Rashi. Just Rashi. He's even worse than grandfather. He's always angry. He shouts at me every day, and makes me run and learn how to fight. If I don't hunt for my own food, I won't get anything to eat. I really hate him. He insults me all the time and sheared off my bangs because supposedly I need to see what's in front of me. Yesterday I fell unconscious from one of his punches. That asshole broke my nose. I really don't know how long I can stomach this training. I want to go back to Mom, but Rashi won't let me. Apparently it would weaken my resolve. Rashi and grandfather can't keep me in these mountains forever, though. I know when Rashi falls asleep, his snores are loud like a mountain echo. I can use that and run away. Tomorrow night I'll make a break for it and see Mom. Rashi liked to cut off the hair of little girls? I filed that information away for later. The story wasn't half bad. If that nameless girl managed to flee from Rashi, I'd for sure taunt him to hell and back should we meet again. I was about to turn the page when a person came storming into the tent, skidding to a halt in front of my futon. Naruto! That kind of excitable voice could belong only to one of two persons in all of Konoha. One of them was dead. Lee? What are you doing here? I thought you were stationed in Ikubacho. I looked up in askance and immediately regretted that decision, since his green suit was hugging his junk like a prostitute her pimp. I found a point at the opposite side of the tent that was much better to stare at. I still am, he said. I've been on leave for half a week now, though. But when I heard the news, I said I'd do it and came straight here from Konoha. News? I asked, straining hard to look past his junk and toward his face. His smile was so big, bright, and excited, you could have powered a whole village with it. It's Hinata, he said. She went into labor. Sakura told me. I came here as fast as I could, hoping you weren't out on a mission to bring youthful glory to Konoha. The words hit me like a brick to the face. I was frozen to the futon, my thoughts going a mile a minute. Then I jumped up, rushed over to the corner where my duffel bag was leaning against a barrel of water, and rifled through it for my shirt. The pain was so remote all of a sudden that I could hardly believe it myself. My eyes felt like they were about to pop out of their sockets as I was struggling into my vest. Shikamaru came back into the tent. I just heard that Lee's here, he said. What are you doing, Naruto? You should be. Hinata's in labor, I said. I half expected Shikamaru to stop me due to my injuries, but he said nothing else, content to observe me alongside Lee. When I turned from my bag, all kid out, Shikamaru smiled. I'll take care of things here. Give Hinata my best. The little one as well. I will, I said. I couldn't keep it in anymore. My whole face felt stretched into a single, all-encompassing grin. I shouldered the bag and stepped out into the sunlight, Lee following me. 2 minutes later we were cutting through the forest toward Konoha at a speed that would shear the skin from bone for most people. Chapter 2. Fortified and well-guarded, Konoha's walls became visible in the evening hours. During my journey with Lee I hadn't thought once about stopping, even if my breath came wheezy like wind in a drainpipe and my legs burnt worse each leap. The walls looming just ahead, I had to keep myself from jumping over them and breaking wartime regulations. There'd be no exception to the rules, not even for little old me, soon to be the most badass father in the world. Lee and I came to a brutal stop before the main gate, blasting away the pebbles underfoot in a wide circle. Within seconds, Chunin and Jonin had us surrounded, their knives, swords, and wires gleaming in the fading sunlight. Some situations needed a measured approach, Kakashi's words, so I raised my hands peacefully enough that even the slowest Chunin could track my motions. Uzumaki Naruto, leader of Team 16 and Team 19, Wind Fire Front. My commanding officer is. Yeah, we don't need all that, do we? Let them in, boys. He's good to go. Lee as well. Kiba broke through the ranks of guards and came sauntering toward us with that Inuzuka swagger of complete and utter confidence. His hair had grown long enough that it was hard to tell if he was man or wolf. When a Jonin protested our preferential treatment, Kiba's passing glance shut him up quicker than a punch to the face. What the hell was Kiba doing on guard duty? Last I heard he had been right at the forefront of every major offensive. Had he socked a superior officer or went in too deep after the enemy? If so, no need to bring it up though. Things like those happened routinely to Inuzuka around the world. We bumped fists like in the old times, a touch here, a smack there, a silly noise to cap it off. The procedure left the guards speechless. Lee wasn't quite sure what he was looking at, but I could see that he desperately wanted to try it himself. Listen, I said to Kiba. I'd love to stay right now, but I've got to get to Hinata. We can catch up later. His eyes grew big. Is it time? It is, I said. He clapped my shoulder. Off you go then. Make space, you damn bastards. Here's a father coming through. Are you deaf? Space, I said. I leapt over their heads, onto Konoha's main thoroughfare. The last thing I heard was Kiba asking Lee whether he had any illegal contraband hidden in his suit. I stepped up the pace, trying to outrun that image. The streets had grown sadder. Here and there was an attempt at restoring some of the old vitality, a dash of colored tarpaulin, a row of planted trees, balconies full of flowers, yet barely any people showed their faces. The clotheslines were empty. Most civilians had migrated to areas lacking shinobi villages. Which was fair, given that we shinobi had hit a rough patch when it came to how we were treating each other. I came running into the foyer of the hospital, looking around wildly before fixing my eyes on the nurse manning the reception. I still looked battered and bruised, more animal than man. When I walked over to the nurse, she shrunk back into her chair. This close to the scene of action, the lump in my throat was closing up my windpipe. I croaked. My wife. Unable to get out anything else. Your wife? the nurse said, fear easing off her face. She adjusted her glasses. Labor. I managed. Me, father. Soon. I was making myself out to be a first-class mouth breather in front of that lady. Thankfully, understanding dawned on her. Uzumaki-san, correct? She said with a smile. Is that the name of your wife as well? I nodded proudly. It had been a battle and a half to get this past the other Hyuga, but we'd done it, not the least due to Haishi's help. The nurse accessed the records, trailing her finger down a row of names. A minute later she closed the book. I'm sorry, but she's not here. What? Is the birth over already? I can't say. No one with the name Uzumaki checked into the hospital since your last visit 6 years ago. She looked at me over the rim of her glasses. Shinobi on active duty have a mandatory 1-year checkup, Uzumaki-san. I will let this slide for now, but do come by as soon as you can. Try Hyuga. Oh dear, your wife is a Hyuga? No wonder she isn't here. They're a secretive bunch, with all kinds of birthing rituals. You'll have better luck finding her at the Hyuga compound. I'm sure she's there. Birthing rituals. Right. Hinata might have told me about those. Maybe. I ran out of the reception hall, cutting across the hospital lawn to save time. An elderly couple jumped from their park bench. 40 years younger, they might have killed me on accident, being startled shinobi and all that. Weak murderous intent flared up behind me for a moment, then I was out of sight. The Hyuga compound wasn't far from the hospital, and I made good time there. A branch Hyuga guarded the gate. His attentive appearance would never tell you that he was bored, but I knew better. No matter where you came from, guard duty broke you eventually. If there ever was a human universal, it was this. I skidded to a halt before him. It sure wasn't my most dignified entrance. Uzumaki-san, he said, surprised. Hayashi-sama is not in at the moment. We didn't know you were coming. Shouldn't you be? Is it over? The birth? My stomach sank into my sandals at the befuddled look on his face. Then his eyes brightened. The labor is not taking place here, Uzumaki-san. You will be able to find Hinata-sama back at your home. She wished to be in a comfortable and known environment for the birth. A quick thank you, and off I was again, leaping onto the next best roof and smiling like a loon as I kept jumping from house to house. Hinata wanted to be in a comfortable environment. She wanted to be in our home. Soon I'd be with her, and then with the little one too. I had to think of a name. We had to think of a name. A good one, with power and grace and all that made a name amazing. Damn, could this day get any better? Uzumaki-san. I dug in my heels, breaking a tile underfoot. Yes? 2 ANBU had stopped me, one stocky, one lanky, both armed, armored and ready, even though they stood relaxed in front of me. The Hokage wishes to see you. The warmth in my belly was gone. You can't be serious. They stared back at me with these dark empty manholes ANBU had for eyes in their masks. No humor to be found. I glanced at the direction of my home. Come on, guys. My wife's in labor. I'm going to be a dad. A dad! Can you imagine? They remained as stoic as lampposts. Another tack then. Can't you say you found me in, let's see, half an hour? At least give me the time to see my wife for a moment, while she's having our baby. I didn't have to play up my desperation by much. If they took the bait, I'm sorry to say, I'd do them a bad turn. The moment I set foot across that door Zill, I'd barricade the place with 1,000 clones if need be until the birth was over and done with. Lanky and Stocky weren't interested though. They stayed aloof and repeated their order. A growl was building in the back of my throat. How long will this take? That is for the Hokage to decide. I came very close to hitting them. Even in my current state I was more than strong enough to take on 2 ANBU. But these 2 came with direct orders during wartime. If I knocked them around, I'd land in water hot enough to boil ramen with. I didn't like that hanging over my family. My daughter should grow up having every opportunity, without any of the baggage I had to carry as a brat. There were many reasons to reach for the hat, but ever since Hinata had told me she was pregnant, this one had become chief among them. If I wore the robes, no one, no matter how old or how stuck in past regrets and losses, would dare treat my kid badly. I'd make damn sure of that. I'd always give her something to look up to. Something to be proud of, like my dad had. I couldn't slug my future shinobi though, or my chances would go down considerably. Grumbling for them to hurry up, I dashed past the 2 ANBU, tearing across the roofs toward Danzo's office. If I missed the birth of my child because of this, one day I'd have them scrubbing my damn toilet. Follow me, please, Uzumaki-san. He will see you now. I was on my feet the moment Danzo's secretary rounded the corner. The past minutes had been like waiting for ramen to finish without any of the excitement. The secretary led me through a dark hallway, then pushed open a door and ushered me inside. My eyes had to get used to the brightness first. The room reeked of antiseptic. Danzo sat on a white chair, wearing a white hospital robe, studying a map and reports on a white table. His visible arm was thin now, barely half of what I remembered. Near a stack of unopened scrolls lay the red and white hat, as if to remind visitors of his status. A tray on wheels stood next to his chair, holding tonics of different colors. One vial was uncorked, a tiny puddle of blue liquid spilled around it. The sickness pervading the room stopped me short. I had heard rumors that Danzo wasn't appearing in meetings anymore, but I hadn't put much stock in them. Maybe I should have. My eyes drifted to the large hospital bed in the corner of the room. Every inch was covered with swirls and squiggles. Machines collared the bed on all sides like bodyguards, filling the room with a host of dull, rhythmic sounds. Somewhere in the rafters a few ANBU were sure to be slinking around as well. "Are you done gawking, Uzumaki? Sit down." Without looking up from the map, Danzo weakly motioned at one of the chairs. As I took my seat, his eye met mine for a brief moment, and most of my worry fell away. Obsidian, steely, either broken nor bent, in that I was the resolve to start another war this very night if need be. Not necessarily a good thing, but at least Konoha hadn't lost its leader yet. I had learned long ago to look for the silver lining wherever I could. "Permission to speak, sir," I said. Once Gigi had died and Danzo became the Godaime, Sakura had drilled me mercilessly in matters of appropriate behavior. I'd hated it at first, but it had been before I came to know Jiraiya and Tsunade. With my direct link to the higher powers gone, I adapted. By now it was like any other persona a shinobi might find the need to develop. "Granted," he said. "My wife is in labor. I know this must be important, but could we reschedule this meeting for tomorrow? I want to see the birth of my daughter." I smiled, ready to uncork the honey jar. "She'll make a good kunoichi one day, better than any you ever had on the force, I promise." When Danzo replied with a grunt, I thought it sounded amused. He stayed silent, though, and kept focusing on his report. Maybe it had been unfunny to him after all? Half a minute later I was quite certain his grunt had been one of anger. "So," I began again. "About the birth." He put the scroll aside. "I wish your family good fortune, Uzumaki, but matters of the village always stand above those of personal nature." Danzo's voice was raspy and on the haggard side, but the undercurrent of authority was hard to miss. I glanced at the clock. When Danzo went back to his report, a disrespectful grunt slipped out of my mouth. Even Sakura's teachings had their limit. "At least have the decency to be quick about it, man." He made a mark on a different sheet of paper, filed it away a long minute later, then leaned back in his chair, quite unimpressed. "As you wish, Uzumaki. What can you tell me about grass country?" "Small country. Lots of forests, rivers, and ravines. The Third War didn't treat it too kindly. Last I heard Orochimaru made the place his home after quitting on rice country, which is why for once we in Iiwa haven't made it our stomping ground. That's about it. And wasn't that just the damnedest thing, attributing peace to the snake?" "Adequate," Danzo said. "For the most part. You forgot that grass has rich soil and has historically been a major exporter of food." "So?" Danzo snorted in dismay. "An army needs food, Uzumaki. A lot of it. Say nothing of the geostrategic importance of grass. If we take possession of these resources, our efforts against Iiwa will be much improved. It would give us the edge needed to bring this war to an end. Having had Jiraiya and Kakashi as teachers, I would have thought you to jump from joy at such an opportunity." "Orochimaru is still haunting that place," I said. "Any attempt at making grass ours, and he'll be there to kick us out. With him hiding in the bushes, it's a waste of manpower." A horrible idea dawned on me. Would Danzo actually order me to take out Orochimaru? I wasn't afraid of the snake, but it would be a sure death sentence to quite a few people on my team. "Sir," I added curtly, "I don't think sending my team to assassinate Orochimaru is a good idea. Let me go alone, and I can." "You're speaking nonsense, Uzumaki. Orochimaru has already been taken care of." Without giving me a chance to process this information, Danzo went on. "The details are classified and not your concern. What is your concern, however, is this." He slapped his hand feebly on the part of the map that showed grass. "The clans that supported Orochimaru's rule are scattered all across the country. It also won't take long for Iiwa to realize that Orochimaru's grip on grass has slackened. We need to move fast and establish ourselves in that space. Otherwise the opportunity will be lost." "Are you saying, Uzumaki Naruto, you are now commanding officer of every shinobi within the borders of grass country?" Your task is to establish a foothold and make sure that no power other than Konoha has access to this vital resource. Your squad will, of course, stay with you. More men are already at a suitable site for a stronghold, setting up camp to facilitate the transition. You will receive more detailed instructions tomorrow. I looked at him full of wonder and horror, as though he was the first human being I had ever seen in my life. My leave? You have 3 days to get your affairs in order. But 3 weeks. They said 3 weeks. The situation has changed. He gave me a flinty look. Hiruzen spoke highly of you. Prove him right and do Konoha proud, Uzumaki. I stood rooted to the spot, and it took his grunted. Dismissed. Before I found my way to the door. I left the Hokage tower in a trance. Night had fallen already and a chilly breeze was tousling my hair. The half-moon above Konoha looked ready to fall and decapitate some poor sod. I blinked. What the hell had just happened in there? How could a man go from commanding 7 people to more than 30 times that in the span of 15 minutes? The faraway bark of a dog broke me out of my stupor. I jumped off the street and hurtled across the rooftops. No one would stop me this time on my way to Hinata. And if Danzo himself got in my way, I'd barrel right through his arthritic carcass, the fallout be damned. I had upgraded my apartment upon becoming a jonin. Higher ranks gave higher pay, even for easier missions. I had a solid track report with my neighbors, too. My landlord was a cantankerous windbag, but she liked money. There had been no trouble when I bought the second apartment next to the first, and broke down the walls dividing them. Money, respect, a nice place to come home to that wasn't empty. It was a life I had dreamed of as a kid, and through grit and tears I'd made it possible. When I landed on the street before my apartment complex, my head was spinning. Hinata was having our baby in there. I was actually about to become a father. The thought just seemed so unbelievable. I raced up the stairs, taking 2 steps at a time, and hurried along the outside hallway to our apartment. The door opened, and Sakura peered outside. There you are, she said. I sensed you down in the street. Your chakra is all over the place. Must be the excitement. I tried to glimpse past her into the dimly lit apartment. Where is she? Is it over? Am I? Follow me, Sakura said, leading the way. I did, obedient like a dog and with the same bundle of unease and excitement in my stomach as an academy student starting their first year. At the door to my bedroom, Sakura gave me a look I couldn't quite interpret. It was gone a moment later. She held her finger to her lips and whispered. They're asleep now, both of them. No mean feat for your daughter. She's got your lungs for sure. Sakura gave me a tired smile. I did all the regular procedures already. No need to worry, she's as healthy as can be. As is Hinata. You can go in, of course, but please let them rest. They did a lot of work today. I hadn't made it in time then. I had missed the first milestone in my daughter's life. I was still standing before the door, useless as a ramen cook in a sushi restaurant, when Sakura pushed me forward. Go on in, she said, and I followed her command out of habit. The room was quiet and dark and smelled of sweat. The blinds were raised, and the moonlight pasted a checkered motif on the parquet. My orange blanket was rising, lowering, then rising again. Nothing in that room could have reassured me more than Hinata's breathing. I stood listening to it, then padded over to the crib at the foot of the bed. All my shinobi instincts were working overtime to make sure I stayed quiet and undiscovered. I wasn't sure I could handle the little one waking up without Hinata there to help and introduce me. Then my eyes found my daughter. She lay prone in the middle of the crib, and she was the tiniest thing I'd ever seen. Everything about her was small-sized, from the head to her curled stubs of fingers and the fuzz of bright hair that shone like silver in the moonlight. To everyone asking, I'd always answered that my girl would have no trouble later in life if only she got her qualities from her awesome mother. I'd be lying, though, if I denied my fist pump at the shade of her hair. I reached into the crib, brushing my big, oafy finger across her tiny hand. This little thing was supposed to go out into the world on her own one day. I had a fist-sized sailor's knot in my chest at the thought. No way that would happen. I'd never let her or her mother come to harm. And when all was said and done, both would be proud of me. They wouldn't ever regret belonging to this family. I had always been very particular about promises, but if ever there was one I intended to keep, it was this one. I awoke to the chirping of birds, my head warm from the sun and the bed sheet under me full of slobber. The night before, I had settled down in a chair right next to the bed. I must have keeled right over some time afterwards, bedding myself in the most uncomfortable position known to man once the tiredness had kicked back in. Still, I had earned the rest, and I was never above using weird positions to sleep. I kept my eyes shut, ignoring the soft breeze from the window. I inched my head away from the wet spot I had left on the sheet and gave a satisfied grunt. Sleep could take me once more. Take a good look at him. That's your papa. Those words blew my eyes wide open. I sat ramrod straight in the chair. Hinata lay in the bed, her back propped against an army of cushions. Part of her dark blue nightgown was pushed aside. While Hinata was holding her close, Tiny took to her breast like I did to ramen. Her fingers lay flat on the breast as if to take hold, and her mouth went at a steady rate. Her eyes were a graceful violet shading into white at the edges. For all I could tell, she looked content. You're staring, Hinata said with a soft laugh. I can't help it. I said nothing and looked at Hinata. So much had worn her down before, the field injury that took her right eye, Hayashi's subsequent order to stay in Konoha, and Hinata's demand that she be allowed my name should she comply, her decision to become a medic mean equal to Sakura and Tsunade, the continued battle against the more stubborn part of the Hyuga. But all these things seemed not to burden her anymore. Right now, Hinata's smile wasn't one of determination to convince herself she could make it through hardship, or to cover up her unease, but a genuine one. It was a smile that went straight to her eyes and then filled the whole room. I sat staring, my arms hanging uselessly down my sides. Then I pushed back the chair. It was time for introductions. Hinata scooted over, and I climbed into the bed, lowering myself next to her. She had showered. The flowery smell of shampoo still clung to her hair. I took another look at Tiny, who was still feasting like a champion, then turned my head and kissed Hinata. I had waited 4 months to do that. If I had my way, it would take equally long to end it. I miss you, she breathed around my lips. I smiled into the kiss. Same here, believe me. Slowly, I tore myself away and regarded the hungry blonde fuzzed wonder in her arms. She needs a name. I keep calling her Tiny in my head. I have a few suggestions, but have you thought of? There was a loud knock at the door to the apartment. A yawn came from the hallway, footfall, then the door jarred open. Sakura was speaking quietly to whomever was disturbing us. So she had slept over? It was good to know that she had my back. I'd make her a godmother too. Still, I was surprised that Hinata had chosen Sakura to help her during the birth. As far as I knew, they really didn't speak that much on a day-to-day basis, not nearly as much as Sakura and I anyway. Hinata had gotten it on much better with Shizune, who had overseen her studies during the pregnancy. In fact, I had always thought Hinata disliked Sakura for some reason, but that just showed how wrong I got it when it came to reading the mind of a woman. Or you could chalk the decision up to pregnancy flightiness, if such a thing existed. Who knew? Presently, when Sakura's voice got heated in the hallway, and bits and pieces like, "You really shouldn't," were flying around, I swung my legs out of the bed. "I'll be back in a moment," I told Hinata. Whoever was interrupting this moment better had a damn good reason. I walked into the hallway and narrowed my eyes at the masked shinobi on the doorsill. ANBU again. I had an inkling who was calling for me. "Uzumaki-san," the ANBU said when I had pushed past Sakura, right up to him. He was taller than me by a good head, but I had never been embarrassed by having to glare up at authority. His breath quickened under the mask. "Good. A newbie." "What is it? Make it quick, man. The Hokage wishes for you to speak with Shikaka-san to go over the details for your upcoming mission." "I haven't got the time now. Be a dear and tell him that I'll be over in an hour or so." The guy's hand twitched, a minuscule motion, but it told me enough. He was gathering his courage. "To be frank, sir, this is a direct order from the Hokage. It isn't wise to delay." I took another step, you couldn't have fit a kunai between us, and smiled up at him. "Listen. I'm in a good mood today and I know ANBU training is stressful, so I'll repeat what I said. Go to Shikaka-san and inform him that I'll come and talk everything over in an hour. Understood?" He was hesitating, his breath becoming more rapid. His eyes were roaming around, looking for potential threats. His hands shook a little. Then he nodded abruptly and shined away. "You didn't have to intimidate him," Sakura said, leaning against the doorframe. "I'm sure you could have talked him into your point of view. He's a rule guy. He would have followed me into my bedroom if I hadn't used it." It being a nifty trick Kakashi had shown Sakura and me shortly before he died a few years ago, a way to, let's say, disperse difficult situations. You flex certain muscles quick enough to give the trained eye the impression of being attacked, without ever being really able to confirm it. Hard to see if you didn't know what to look for, but it drove you wild sure enough. And small wonder it did. After all, your instincts, honed over years of grueling work, suddenly told you that you were about to be ripped into like a log at a training ground. Bless Kakashi. He had always known best how to scare the living shit out of people. "Do me a favor and make sure no one troublesome comes close to this place for the next hour, alright?" Sakura raised an eyebrow. Troublesome? You really do notice that Shikamaru's your second in command, you know? But sure. I'll keep them away. I nodded gratefully and went past her, but then stopped in the hallway. Your girl, by the way, Izuna, she's doing a good job. A bit nervous, but she's a good medic. Your teaching comes through. Then I left for my bedroom. There was still a lot to be done. Naming Tiny for one. Holding her as well. The thought gave me a jolt, and I scratched my head as I moved back into the bedroom. I had to be really careful not to break her on accident. Hours later, Shikaku had given me all the necessary information. I was leaving the barracks exhausted and firmly expecting to be left alone so I could spend time with my family. It had been quite a battle. Shikamaru's old man was surprisingly hard-headed, but at least my squad got to keep their 3 weeks off. Hayashi had caught me outside the office, too. We had a quick talk about our mutual happiness, then the frowny face came back on, dripping gravitas. He asked me about my mission and how I was going to train my one-day-old daughter. When I told him the answer to both questions was classified, he actually relented. He seemed the same Hayashi on the tin, old dogs and new tricks and all that, but in truth he'd grown more mild these days. Becoming a grandfather might do that to you. Before he went back to the compound, he gave me a nice box as a gift to honor my command, where I could store my important and official correspondence. I thanked him dutifully. I nodded to the Barak guards as I passed them, glad to be out of that ugly place. It was where command, aside from Danzo, kept its headquarters. Shinobi could live there for next to nothing, which beat out rent prices big time. They called this hideous mix of wood and concrete the plates because it looked like a stack of used dishes and was just as clean. Living there was as likely to give you a roof over your head as making you think of taking a knife to yourself. 2 of my squad were staying there during their off time. Both were saving up to get the hell away from it. Sometimes I tinkered with the mission reports to make their roles stand out, so that the dispensary gave them a little bonus. Shikamaru didn't like it. Of course he had noticed the first time I did it, but I was usually quite good at dodging around when he wanted to talk it over. He was just afraid the brass would notice and punish us. I thought they rather had more pressing matters to worry about. Hands in my pockets, head tied around my arm, I walked away from the barracks, down the streets of Konoha. I relaxed into the sunny noon as daylight was sluicing off that dreary atmosphere. 3 days weren't much, true enough, but I'd be a damn idiot if I spent them whining. Hayashi had been right, though. I should talk things over with Hinata sooner rather than later. I showed only the briefest of reactions when suddenly 2 people were escorting me as if they'd never been anywhere else. They were whistling, watching the few stalls still left with amusement. He twitched, Tsunade said. Told you he would, Jiraiya returned. He's good, but not that good. A sound-sealing bubble was building up around us. Jiraiya had shown me once, but it was fairly complicated. I had never bothered with it, going for flashier things instead. I kept my eyes on the road home. We're here to get some gossip, kiddo. Jiraiya's booming voice made me vibrate right next to him, even though there was no point of contact between us but the ground. So? He asked. What's her name? Who are her godparents? Come now, kiddo, don't be shy. Talk to us. Chia. Uzumaki Chia. Tsunade snapped her fingers, but I sensed no money being exchanged. Both had lost their bet. Good. A good name, Jiraiya said. And her godparents? Who is doing the honors? Sakura and Shikamaru. Your second in command? Tsunade asked. Is that a good decision? You'll be together in the field. I glanced at her. None of my shinobi will die. Shikamaru was Hinata's choice, by the way. And I stood fully behind her on that. On the campaign that took Hinata's eye, she would have lost much more if not for him. I had no doubt that if anyone came even close to harming Chia, Shikamaru would devise a million ways to put that guy into a world of misery. Are they together? Shikamaru and Sakura? Tsunade asked. Not that I know of, I said. We walked another half-minute in silence, then I stopped in the middle of the street. You're more than welcome to visit us and get to know Chie. But I know you're here to talk shop, so spill it. I want to get back with my family. What's going on? What do you want with me? I had the unpleasant experience of being dragged into a shunshin. Coming out of it, I found myself standing in a room next to a flat table and cushions. The paper walls around us had been drawn shut. 3 bottles of sake stood on the table, each with its own complimentary cup. A lantern with the number 6 stenciled on it hung suspended above us, spreading a warm red light. You wouldn't have been able to tell the time of day outside. This could have been just as much the inside of a slug or toad as an inn. Sit down, Jiraiya said, giving my shoulder a hearty slap. There's cause to celebrate, and just one way to do it right. He took to his side of the table, already in the process of stuffing his pipe. I really don't think I should right now, I said, still standing. I have to get back. Jiraiya's right, Tsunade said. Sit down. You're getting an invitation from 2 of the Sannin. That ought to count for something, don't you think? Besides, it's not often that shinobi get to have their wish in so many different ways. She poured the first round of cups and toasted to me. She refilled them immediately after throwing back her head. I sank into the pillow. What had I missed? This celebration, nice as it was, struck me as odd, and very secretive at that. I wasn't planning on drinking much, but I took my cup regardless. Maybe it loosened up my brain enough to make me see. Sometimes you had to join them, in order to understand the world from their perspective. Which was beside the fact that they had me deadly curious. Tuchie, I said, raising my cup. This one's for you, Tiny. Tuchie, they repeated. We slammed back our cups. Tsunade refilled, shooting Jiraiya a hooded look that set me on guard. I smiled at them. Let's go around. Who's next in line? Tsunade shrugged. I'll do it. She lifted her cup. To your promotion. It was costing me precious time with Hinata and Chie, but I could toast to that readily enough. Another row of cups was duly chugged, and soon again refilled. Jiraiya came next, and he was gazing at me like a hungry animal. I was sure by now they had another bet going, but what about I couldn't say for the life of me. To your future, Jiraiya said, his eyes never straying from mine. They tipped back their cups. I raised an eyebrow. That's not very specific, is it? Don't get me wrong, I'm honored that you've invited me to this little gathering. But if there's something you want to tell me, there are easier ways. He doesn't know, Tsunade said with a self-satisfied tone. Jiraiya exhaled noisily. Goddamn, kiddo, can't you use your brain for once? Disgruntled, he handed Tsunade a satchel. She had won the bet then. Interesting. Jiraiya leaned forward. You've been to Danzo's office, haven't you? Noticed anything strange there? I hadn't had much chance to think that night over, since most of my thoughts had been centered around my family. And wasn't that a nice thing to say? I got all warm and fuzzy just thinking it. But to the matter at hand, there had been something off about Danzo, yes. Now that you mention it. He was injured and sick. A bed full of seals, talking to me in a white robe, his hand thin as a stick, blue-veined and looking like decay itself. Quite severely at that. I continued. He is one of our strongest shinobi, the Godaime to boot. Who could have? Then it hit me. I was a fool for not having thought of it earlier. Danzo had told me outright, after all. Orochimaru? I asked, incredulous. Their faces told me I was right. Is he dead for good then? As far as we know, Tsunade said. Neither my slugs nor any of Jiraiya's toads have heard or seen a sign of Orochimaru since then. And believe us, we looked everywhere. So it does look like Danzo snuffed him out. That gave me a whole lot more respect for Danzo all of a sudden. No wonder grass was suddenly up for grabs. He had made it so. Jiraiya reclined into the pillow. Smoke curled atop his pipe, filling the room with the aroma of wood and spices. I'm curious. What do you think your promotion is about? I shrugged. Compensation for a dangerous mission. We didn't get everything, but all things considered we did reasonably well, what with Rashi being there. Isn't that the way it usually goes? Tsunade topped up her cup, drank, and repeated the process. Her cheeks had a deep flush going, but her eyes were still sharp. He's not getting it, Jiraiya. Let's tell him and get drunk. I'm tired of this game. Jiraiya chuckled. If you want to, sure. It doesn't seem like we're getting anywhere like this. It would help if you two were less cagey about things. The guessing game was starting to tick me off something fierce. I had enough on my plate already without all the secrecy. Get to it, or I'm gone. I've only got 3 days. The corner of Jiraiya's mouth twitched. I worried he'd play more games, but then he thought better of it and nodded. All right, keep your hat on. Or rather, try a new one out for size. It's nothing to be angry about, just the office of Hokage up for consideration. No biggie. He had me. Worse, he knew it. I leaned across the table, barely noticing how Tsunade rescued a bottle from my sudden movement. Say that again. He tried looking solemn, but he couldn't contain the smile, despite his morbid message. Tsunade did everything she could, but it's only a matter of time until Danzo dies. Whatever poison Orochimaru used before meeting the Shinigami is beyond the realm of our knowledge. Danzo knows it, too, and he's looking for a suitable replacement. Think about it. You're an accomplished shinobi, but commanding a whole front? That's a steep climb, wouldn't you say? He's testing you out. He wants to know if you have it. As far as vetting processes go, that's fairly standard. Not just you, though, Tsunade said, looking at me over the edge of her cup. There's going to be a change in leadership at the front between Water and Lightning as well. Depending on how you two fare, he'll make his decision. In any case, Danzo wants someone young to energize the troops. A figure they can look up to, not unlike the Godaime. Usually he's more conservative with such matters. But as far as I can see, he's banking on the fact that, even if you become Hokage, you'll heed the counsel you'll get from old-timers like Shikaku and us. I would. Probably. Maybe. Are you drinking like that because you're celebrating, or because you're pissed you couldn't heal him? Tsunade's scrunched-up face told me the answer. In his dying moments, Orochimaru had gotten one over her, after all. Likely both. Jiraiya answered in Tsunade's stead, ignoring her glare. We don't particularly like Danzo, but our animosity doesn't stretch far enough to celebrate his death. Mind you, I won't shed a tear either. I don't think many people will. Who's the second person being tested? Who's my competition? Abirame Shino, Tsunade said. He was a classmate of yours, right? Shino, huh? Haven't heard that name in a while. I was still close enough to kiss Jiraiya, so I settled back down. My thoughts were whirling about like threads tied to a spinning top. Could this be it? After all these years, had I really made it far enough to be considered? I reached for the sake nestled in Tsunade's arms and took a deep draught right from the bottle. I wiped my mouth and stared up at the lantern, on which the number 6 was proudly displayed. Uzumaki Naruto, Godaime. It had a nice ring to it. Chapter 3. They have no right to take away your time with us. Hinata's whisper was barely audible, even though I stood right in front of her. Gaze glued to the floor, face shaded by bangs. This wasn't the expression I'd wanted to see after months away from home. The bright afternoon sun came streaming in through the window of our living room, tinting my ratty sofa a more appreciable color. A breeze rustled the new curtains Hinata had bought while I had been on duty. Chia was asleep in her crib. We had just come back from a stroll in the park nearby. It might not have been the best moment to tell her that I'd be gone in 2 days' time, but I didn't want to push it away until the last evening. I was searching for words, though nothing I came up with fit. I knew where she was coming from, and my time with her and Chia was precious. Yet so was the dream I had held for so long finally being in reach. If I could make it a reality quicker, so that Chia could be proud of her pops, then I'd do everything in my power to that end. Hinata still wasn't looking at me. When I noticed her faint trembling, I raised my arms to gather her up in them. I needed her warmth to reassure me I wasn't just being an idiot. The moment I came closer, she moved over toward the door. I just need a moment to think. I'll be back in an hour. Her retreat was hasty and clumsy. She was still quite a bit larger than usual. When she almost slipped getting into her sandals, my arm did its pitiful dance upward again. A few seconds later the gravel crunched on the road below our apartment. I stood next to the empty sofa. The room looked much bleaker without her. Shaking my head, I trudged over to Chia's crib, which was shaded from the sun. I turned one of the chairs around and sat down, staring at her tiny belly rising and falling. I have no idea if I'm doing the right thing here, I whispered to her. Your mama probably believes I'm an idiot right now. I hope she gets back soon. I want to spend what little time I've got left here with you too. I won't. I can't. I ended on a sigh. Back in my academy and genin days, doing and saying the right thing had been much easier. I might not always have been a tasteful speaker, but at least I was an honest one, who knew what was good and what bad within an instant, and wasn't afraid to say so. I brushed my fingers over the golden fuzz on Chia's head. I'll make you proud, girl, that's a promise. The only one I can give right now. You'll have the strongest pops there is, just like I had. And together we'll be the greatest at whatever we do, 'cause that's the Uzumaki way, eh? I smiled at her, then leaned back in the chair. The birdsongs kept coming in through the window, and the mild afternoon heat soon lulled me into sleep. My dream was indistinct. The waking not so much. Pots clanged in the kitchen, glassware tinkled, a sizzling went along with the quick, skillful tack-tack-tack of a knife on a chopping board. I stretched, reassured myself that Chia was still there, then followed the smell of food. Hinata stood in front of the stove in her favorite orange apron, cooking up a storm the likes I hadn't seen in a while. Little pans, large pans, a board here, a board there, at least 2 pots and a bowl with already prepared vegetables. It was a different battlefield to what I was used to. She navigated it tirelessly, though, her hair done in a lazy bun that went halfway down her neck and was held together artfully by a few needles. It seemed like a monstrous effort for someone who had given birth only a day before. She had such a look of fierce determination about her as she tasted the soup in one of the pots, I had to stop uncomfortably at the doorsill and tug at my pants to cover my growing erection. The scene before me had my mind going to 1,000 places. If it weren't for her razor-sharp focus and our argument before, I might have considered trying for a sibling for Chia right then and there. I had no idea if that was even possible this soon after giving birth, but I was more than willing to experiment. I stood watching her for a few minutes until, in a brief lull of action, she turned and arched her eyebrow, nodding at my crotch. Of course she had noticed. I was glad her eye was sparking with mischief, though, and not anger or sadness. Were things good between us now? I had no clue. "It will be another hour until dinner," she said, arms crossed. The wooden spoon in her left was dribbling miso on the tiled floor. "Are you going to watch me the whole time?" "Maybe. I won't be able to focus on the cooking." "That's fair. I won't either." It brought a smile to her lips. And wasn't that just the best feeling ever, getting your girl's face to shine like that? "Go on and do something else until dinner's ready," she said. "I won't have all the groceries go to waste because I wasn't paying attention. Play with Chia, take her out and get some fresh air. Just take care that she's not directly exposed to the sun. I like it when you're being commanding." Aha! There it was again, that brief flicker of naughtiness. Then it was gone, and she pointed with the spoon at the kitchen door. I grinned and obediently took my leave. Things seemed to be all right between us. I went over to the crib, where Chia lay awake, her lavender eyes tracking me. I suddenly felt exposed. "Hello? How are you?" She didn't answer, but when I reached into the crib she let out a blubber of laughter and took a hold of my finger. "Okay, girl, this'll be new for both of us. I know you've been with your mom so far, but now it's Daddy's turn." Whispering to myself I added, "And hopefully he won't mess this up." I gathered my courage and then took her with both hands, holding her up to my face. We looked at each other as if we were deciding whether we actually belonged together. I could have sunken right into her eyes. They were so much like her mother's. Then Chia flailed her little arms around, first patting me on the cheek, afterwards giving me a solid conk on the nose. "That's right," I said quietly so Hinata wouldn't overhear. "Just like that, girl. You're already punching like an Uzumaki. Wait until you're a bit older, you'll kick ass from here to lightning." As if to prove me right, she flailed more, connecting another solid hit. I chuckled as I prepared for the next battle, getting her rolled up tight in a nice blanket before taking her outside. It was already evening and the sun was almost gone by now, so that at least was one worry less. After Hinata had come bursting out of the kitchen, showing me how to hold Chia, I took her to the place with the greatest view in all of Konoha. The evening sun was just done vanishing behind the staggered line of roofs and trees when I landed on my father's stony hair. "It doesn't look like much now, but give it a moment. You'll see what I mean," I said to Chia, lightly pushing at her nose with my finger. I sat down on one of the bangs, scooted to its edge, and let my legs dangle from each side, holding Chia in an iron grip. It took another 10 minutes for the last vestige of sunlight to fade. Then, one by one, in a cascade of flickering colors, the evening lights of the city came alive, lamps and houses shining with a warm glow, streetlights, one by the other, with their pale light smearing yellow circles on the street, red and orange lampions at the entry to restaurants and brothels swaying in the wind, signs over bars in violet and green buzzing their way to life. I had loved this sight as a boy. I loved it as a man. The streets were much emptier now, but a time would come when they were teeming again. Chia took to the view with gurgling noises, and I told her about a few of the places lit up down below us, and how I had pranked the living daylights out of them. "I'll have to tone it down, though. Your pops has got to be a respectable man now, so you won't get into trouble because of me. And because they probably won't give me the hat otherwise. But mark my words, girl, once I'm sitting in that chair, I'll give them a prank like the world has never seen. They won't be able to stop me then. For that you will have to become the Hokage first, Naruto." I'd be lying if I said I wasn't startled. But even though I had been so focused on Chia that I missed Shino's approach, experience had taught me to take things in stride. I rose to my feet, Chia wiggling in her blanket, and leapt to the base of my father's hair. Shino was waiting, hands stuffed in his pockets, the collar of his coat raised to his ears. He wore his sunglasses, though his hair was short-cropped now. It looked like an effort to regrow it, which meant it had either been sheared or burnt off. He had grown bulkier, too, filling out the coat, and a set of fine scars crisscrossed over his brow and the upper part of his cheek. "It's good seeing you, man," I said. "It's been a while." "You as well, Naruto. Is this your daughter?" "Yeah." I held her forward proudly. "Uzumaki Chia. You have chosen wisely." There was a hint of a smile beneath Shino's collar. I cuddled Chia back to my chest. Shino held out his arm. A bug was wandering along the knuckles of his fist. May I? Is it safe? Shino nodded. We offer these services to all of Konoha. It is nothing to worry about. That was enough for me. He might have become my rival overnight, but I still trusted him. The bug lifted off and landed right on Chia's nose. Her eyes grew big like balloons, and at first I thought everything was all right. Then her face scrunched up. She squeezed her eyes shut, her little chest filled with air, and she let out a bellow of a cry that would be heard in all of Konoha. Oh boy. Sakura was right, Chia definitely had my lungs. In the meantime, Shino's bug had lifted off again, making off to God knows where. I was cradling Chia, saying nonsense words, doing all I could think of to make her stop wailing. In between the cooing, I glared at Shino. You made her cry. Babies do that, Naruto. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. The benefits far outweigh the costs in this analysis. He held up his hand where the bug was sitting placidly. I will bring this to the Aburame stocks. Should she get lost or be abducted within the next 10 years, any Aburame will be able to track and find her. I knew that he was right. On a more visceral level, though, he had made my girl cry, and for that I wanted to punch him and break his sunglasses in half. Thanks, I said, clipped, as Chia's wailing was starting to cease. Better get her home soon. I straightened my shoulders, thinking that I should speed up the no doubt business-related part of this visit. You been to Danzo's yet? He does not seem to be healthy, but I assume you know as much. My estimate is about 4 months to half a year, then he will die, leaving open the position of Godaime. Blunt and to the point. I was warming up to this again. I won't give up the hat, Shino. You know I won't. It's been my dream for as long as I can remember. He raised a brow as if to question why I had even gone to the trouble of stating something this obvious. His face remained calm, though, and impersonal as an undisturbed lake. Since my father's death I have become the head of the Aburame clan, he said. It is long overdue that one of my people tries to attain a higher position of leadership within the village. The elders will rule whether I am the right man for this office or not, but I am going to make an honest attempt, and, how would you say it, give it my damn best shot. If you are my rival in this, any feelings of friendship must fall to the wayside. I had heard the story of Aburame Shibi's death coursing around the fires. He and his scouts had been observing a large troop movement of lightning's finest when the Hokage appeared in their midst. The stories vary from there, but most agree that Shibi was the only reason half the squad got away alive. Details were blurry beyond that one thing. His sacrifice had bought Konoha enough time to position themselves for a counterattack. Aburame Shibi's was another name for a stone that held too many of them already. I was sorry to hear about your dad, Shino. He was very brave. He was, Shino said. But I have been working through it. Logic shows a clear path forward. I smiled sadly. I guess it does, doesn't it? I could see his path clearly as well, the horror, the grief, then having to step into his father's footsteps without delay. Now he didn't just have a clan to command, but also one to convince of himself as their leader. Of course he'd take an opportunity when it arose before him. If he became the Godaime, he would show his people that he was no less man than Shibi, while proving to himself that his father's trust and love hadn't been misplaced. I wasn't unfamiliar with thoughts of that kind, though Shino had arrived at them in a much more orderly way, I was sure. Asuma, Kakashi, Sasuke, now Shino, if asked to, and no one ever would, after a few bottles of sake all of them could have sung songs about family legacies as likely to crush you as to raise you up. Though arguably, you'd have needed more than a few bottles to convince some of them to sing. I shifted Chia in my arms. It was getting darker, and Hinata would have food on the table soon. The little one was getting unruly, too. I wanted to have her back in her crib. I'll have to cut this short here, Shino. I've got a feeling that Chia is getting hungry. Give Hinata my regards. It has been a while since we last saw each other. Will do. And, Shino, no matter the outcome, fair's fair, right? There will be no hard feelings. Good, I said. Best of luck then. Can't have the cloud dwellers laughing at us, eh? He took a shallow bow. As I watched him go to the edge of the monument, then leap into the night, I wasn't so sure if there wouldn't be hard feelings after all. But that was a problem for another time. Right now all I had to do was get Chia home. Things seemed to have worked out with Hinata. I wasn't sure the same could be said if we came late for dinner. I was about to set off, when Chia conked me again. Laughing, I said, "No worries, girl. You'll see your mommy soon enough." Before leaping into the darkness, not quite able to keep the thoughts of my upcoming command off my mind. They weren't unlike flower mites. Once you had them in your pantry, they wouldn't leave you the hell alone. The night was unbearably hot. I had kicked away my blanket half an hour ago, first to the edge of the bed, then off it in contempt. The ineffectiveness of the move annoyed me, since sweat kept springing up all over my body regardless. Outside, cicadas were giving the concert of their lives. If I didn't know better, I'd think this was an orchestrated conspiracy to keep me awake. I turned my head to Hinata. She was sleeping on my outstretched arm, facing me. I studied her, from the strands of dark hair curling around her ears to the curve of her nose, then the lightly parted lips and the scarred flesh around her right eye. Now that she had told me in no unclear terms that she was in no condition for sex, I wanted it more, if that was even possible for a shinobi coming back to his wife after going months without. My stomach gurgled and I turned away again, staring at it across my chest. Dinner had been too delicious. I'd always been a strong eater. This had been Choji-style gluttony. But first and foremost, love went through your stomach, so if the wife cooked up a storm, you damn well ate it all. And I did. And now I suffered. But no one ever said love was easy. The worst part about being awake at night was that my thoughts had enough room to exist in that space between action and sleep. Chie, Danzo, my squad, Hinata, Chie again, Shikamaru, Hinata, Shino, Old Man Sarutobi, Jiraiya and Tsunade, Rashi, Chie, round and round it went, a wheel of thoughts, some pleasant, some less so, that wasn't likely to stop spinning anytime soon. Lately it had become much harder to sleep like a rock and simply declare myself the best of the world come morning. A tiny snore escaped Hinata and drew my eyes back to her. Would I have felt better had she torn into me for being away so soon? Her kind approach was making me feel bad on the double. Worse, she was too kind to calculate such an effect, which made me feel even guiltier. Then again, was I the one at fault? It was Danzo's order after all. Though I couldn't say that I disliked the order itself now, could I? For the first time in my life, my dream was actually coming into reach. In the end, even though I felt guilty, I was glad Hinata had worked through the issue with so little complaint. Over dinner she told me a lot about her training with Shizune, and how she had access to both the standard records and the Hyuga archives, which, with more experience, would make her one of the most efficient medic nin alive when it came to treating chakra-related diseases. I'd had no idea about half of what Hinata was saying, but her eyes had been glowing and I could have listened to her speak for hours. Her passion turned me on. That was the thing. My apartment with her and Chie in it, happy laughter, cooking, the new curtains, the door placard that showed both our names. I wanted to have as much of that as I could before going back to the front, clean memories I could come back to when the goings got tough out there. All this thinking was getting me nowhere though, so I slowly extricated my arm from under her head, then padded over to the crib, reassuring myself Chia was still asleep. I got my clothes from the wardrobe and put them on in the kitchen where I was sure not to wake anyone up. The wind chimes danced around outside the window. Some wind might cool me down, and a night stroll through Konoha hadn't ever hurt anybody. I didn't even get to the door before Hinata had noticed I was gone. She stood in the hallway, tying her white nightrobe. Her hair fell down her shoulders in long, chaotic strands, like ink spattered on the fabric. "Hey," I said. "Sorry for waking you. I just wanted to go for a walk. The heat is insane." "You've been bothered by it the whole night," she said, going past me into the kitchen. "You noticed, huh?" I heard the faucet squeal, followed by running water. When I came into the kitchen, Hinata handed me a glass. "Of course I did," she said softly, sitting down and turning on the light by the kitchen table. I didn't know what to make of this situation. Here I stood, a glass of water in my hand. There she sat, barely blinking while looking at me in silence. No reproach or anger in her eye, but I could tell she was troubled. I chose to keep my memories peaceful and intact. This way was better for all of us to deal with the situation. I guzzled down the water, put the glass on the tabletop, and said, "I'll better be on my way now. Get me some of that sweet wind outside. Maybe it'll make the sweat go away. Thanks for the water." I wheeled around, about to make a hurried escape, when her voice turned my legs into clumps of lead. "I'm sorry," she said. I heard the chair scrape over the tiles as she got to her feet, and the sound of her slippers as she walked up to me. I turned. "I'm sorry," she said again when she stood right in front of me, angling her head up. Her look was as far away from calm as it could possibly be. I tried. Please believe me, Naruto, I really did. I tried to make it perfect and to cook and to laugh, and to say nothing about it. I didn't want to make things difficult just for my sake. And I know it's selfish to do it now. I can't stand it because I know you want us all to be happy, but we have to talk, I have to talk, because I think I'm going to explode if you just leave like this." Her shoulders were shaking. The last part had come out in a swell of words that left me speechless. I wanted to say something, anything, but before I could, she continued, her voice gaining strength. "Of course we might not find a solution for anything. I know you can't just go to Danzo and tell that miserable old man where to stick it. And of course I don't want to keep you from your dream either. You know that. I would never want to be the reason for you to stop smiling. But at least we have to talk. There was a fierceness in her eyes. You can't just go away without saying anything, thinking that nothing will change. That's running away, Naruto. You're not a coward. I know you're not. Hinata stood with her hand on my chest. The way my heart was pounding against my ribcage, I was surprised she didn't already hold it in her palm. She was right though. I had done my very best to push all of this as far away as possible. She wasn't crying. But she wasn't far off either. Another step toward the door was all it would take. What a chump I was, making a classy girl like her tear up. The lump in my throat made it hard to say anything, but at least I knew I wouldn't go over to that door if it killed me right now. I had to take away some of the gloom. We would talk now, and I would do my damn hardest to take away whatever worry she had. A change of mood was in order before that, though. If ever there was a time and a place for an Uzumaki special, it was this moment. I picked her up, ignoring her surprised yelp, and carried her through the hallway. What are you? Shh, I said, carrying her past our bedroom. Chie's sleeping. And we, Hinata, are going to have a talk. I pushed open the door to the living room. Only not in the kitchen, but somewhere more comfortable. Hinata fell silent until I deposited her on the sofa. I went and closed the door, turned on some of the lights, and then plopped down right next to her. I put my arm around her shoulder, pulling her closer. So, that hadn't been so bad, right? I still had no idea what to say exactly, but she wasn't trembling anymore, a step in the right direction if nothing else. Emboldened, I took a shot in the dark. I know it'll be difficult being the only one here for Chie, I said, actually feeling some bitterness well up at the thought. And you've still got your apprenticeship with Shizune and the Hyuga business to take care of on the side and stuff, and I guess what I'm saying is that I'm really sorry I put all this pressure on you and have you bear it alone. It's not fair, Anne. She stiffened in my arm and I stopped talking. I didn't know how, but what little I said had ruined it again already. It's not about having to bear a burden, she said. Chie isn't a burden, with or without you here. It's not about that at all. Then what is it about? You. I was glad for having sat down, because her answer made me stop breathing for a second. Me? Had I done something? Does she mean I could have done more against Danzo? A flush crept up my face. I knew that feeling of being accused of something and having done nothing wrong. It threw me back to my childhood, and I didn't like that one bit. While she stood and walked over to the window, first looking outside then at me, I leaned back into the sofa, crossing my arms. There was a lack of warmth where her body had been. I was quiet, waiting for her to talk. And talk she did, after looking at me a long time, with a gaze that wasn't unfriendly but that I nevertheless couldn't account for. What did she mean by you? Shikamaru and Subaru have been writing me while you were away, she said, lowering herself on the mobile heater in front of the window. Independently of one another. Though I think Subaru's was more of a courtesy letter because he's a Hyuga serving under my husband. Good of them to write. I would talk with both of them once we met up again, sure as sunrise. I wasn't a great writer, so my letters to Konoha were non-existent. That they had written her was souring me quite a bit. Hinata sighed. You're angry. I'm not, I shot back. She puffed out her cheeks and gave me a disbelieving look. Uzumaki Naruto, sometimes you're as stubborn as a mule. Of course you're angry, even though it's nothing to be angry about. Then, as if embarrassed by her outburst, she added quietly. When I said you, I meant that I don't worry about Chie, but about you. You want to protect everyone, I know, especially because of Kakashi, but please protect yourself too. I couldn't stomach it if you were. She paused, closed her eyes for a moment, and continued. I want Chie to have a father growing up, even if he can't be here all the time. So I had ticked all the wrong boxes in my mind and arrived at entirely the wrong conclusion. I ignored the sting I felt at the mention of Kakashi and got up. I reached for her hand and pulled her away from the turned-off heater, back to me. As if that thing could ever be more efficient at warming her. There's no reason to worry about me like that, I said. I've been trained by the best Konoha has to offer. I'm surrounded by capable shinobi all the time. And I'm a Jinchuriki. Really, Hinata, ever since the 10-men treaty the attack to take me out has to be invented first. I brushed my thumb across her cheek, but she pulled back again. I know what I read, she said. And I know what I heard in Konoha. It's not just the rumors and legends that are springing up. I've lost count of the amount of people thanking me on the streets because you saved their sons and daughters, parents, or even grandparents. My heart stops every time they talk to me, Naruto. Every time. They're smiling when they shake my hand, but all I can think of is that you had to be in another life-threatening position to save their family. And then there are the letters. Subaru's are full of praise. He writes them because he knows the Hyuga elders will read them as well, but Shikamaru is worried about you. I am worried about you. I'll need to have a talk with him then. Half a year of marriage, and that was the first time she hit me in any way. It was only a feeble and frustrated slap to the chest, but coming from Hinata it might as well have been a row of knuckles in my face. You're not listening, she said. He's only doing what a good friend does. He's trying to help you. He was, yes, and the last time I accepted his help, changing up what I thought was the right approach, I'd had a bitch of a time getting out of the hole against Rashi because I'd had to care for a knocked-out team member. It was sheer dumb luck that Haru hadn't died that day. Had I been slower by a fraction of a second, he would have been a goner for sure. What am I supposed to do, start letting people die? I said. You shouldn't put too much into Shikamaru's letters, Hinata. He's a worrywart out on the field, who tends to exaggerate. Always has been. There's really nothing to be concerned about. She had treated my injuries? I had felt noticeably lighter after waking up, true enough, but I had attributed that to natural healing. I stared at her. If I had been asleep, then she must have done it barely a few hours after the delivery. And since Sakura hadn't thrown me any angry looks, Hinata must have done it in secret. Why, though, I couldn't say. I said, You should have rested. That's not the point. She slapped my chest again. If it weren't such a bad moment, it'd be kind of cute. As things stood, all I had were layers of frustration, one stacked upon the other like empty ramen cups. What do you want me to do? You said it yourself, I can't just go to Danzo and tell him to take a bender. And even if that were possible, how could I, now that the hat was finally in reach? For better or worse, I'm going to grass and make it ours. I can't change course now. Promise. What? She clawed both hands into my shirt, dragging us closer together. She looked up at me with such strong emotions it struck me dumb. Promise that you won't die. All my life I had made it my personal code that a promise given is a promise kept. I wouldn't be half of who I was had I gone back on the things I said I'd do. But how could I promise that? And at the same time, how could I not promise that after I saw her worry? Especially now that I had described myself as nearly immortal, while painting Shikamaru as an old lady with too many complaints to count them all. How the hell would I look to her if I backtracked now? I had boxed myself in masterfully. And when the words passed my lips at last, it was the first promise in my life that I was unsure about. I didn't know if Hinata sensed this as I spoke, but it wouldn't surprise me. She had always known me better than I knew myself. The following day was tense. We spent our time together with Chia without ever talking of our conversation the night before. But neither of us had forgotten, and the realization that we'd soon be separated put a damper on the mood, no matter how bright the sun shone, or how beautifully the birds were trilling. When we were with Chia, all our attention was focused on her. Once we were alone, though, our talks felt forced. We had silently resolved not to bring it up again, and we kept to that line, even though it made our conversation veer into directions of no interest to anyone. I had as little sympathy for the rising prices of milk and butter as Hinata, true enough, but I could have gone entire lifetimes without ever discussing them in detail. On the family photo we took that day, we wore big smiles and looked at each other lovingly and carefree, as if nothing had nor ever would trouble our family. We were shinobi, though. It was our job to make our faces different than our hearts, and it cheapened the photo a great deal. I'd take it with me still, because I had no other of them, but I'd take a new one the moment this cloud had dispersed. Cruel as it sounded, towards the end of that day I found myself looking forward to the campaign. I'd miss Hinata and Chia, horribly so, but military life was easier. You knew what you had to do. Take this position, torch these supplies, find that information, don't die, never let anyone else die. As a shinobi I had found success with these few rules, despite their being as simple as breaking chopsticks apart. Eventually there came the time to leave. In the crisp early morning Hinata and I stood on the bridge before the western gate, which was as heavily guarded as any other gate these days. The Bochi River ran quietly under our feet, coming from the spring within the Hokage monument, then cutting straight to the cemetery before looping around Konoha and past the training grounds. Most of the cemetery was hidden by trees, but when the boughs tossed in the wind I saw the outer edges of the flame-like stone that we called the Heart of Fire. No matter where you were in that place, looking toward the center you would see it, pulsing red from the sunlight as if it were beating and keeping the dead alive. I always wondered if Kakashi and Gigi were watching me from there. Or if my parents did. Since Danzo would see me off as well, we left Chia with Hayashi for the time being. There was no need for my little girl to see something as ugly as Danzo before also having witnessed the wonders of the world. That would only turn her into a cynic. Hinata was quiet. We weren't holding hands. There was a distance between us as we waited for Danzo, looking out along the river, watching it curl around the forks, a triplet of prong-like rocks that were remnants from a training session gone awry decades ago. A shift in the air announced Danzo's arrival. Hinata and I turned away from the river and found him a couple feet away from us, standing straight, 2 ANBU close behind him. Gone was the hospital garb, replaced by pristine red and white. He leaned only marginally on his cane, all in all a figure of dignity and pride. Windows along the riverside were opening at the spectacle, heads leaning out as the curious onlookers took in their Hokage. He did a good job hiding his condition. The shaking wouldn't be visible to anyone but those right in front of him, the stick-like, varicose arm only known to those who had seen it outside of the long sleeves of his robes. If Konoha at war was a rickety boat, then that cane for sure was the rudder. And Danzo clung to it like a man possessed, trying to hold himself up while also steering us forward. But give a man enough incentive, and he'll summon a demon to appear strong to others. Have you set everything in order, Uzumaki? As much as I could in 3 days. Danzo ignored the jab. The troops I sent before you should have prepared a suitable base of operation by now. With them you should be able to solidify our position in grass. More troops will join up with you shortly, your team among them. You will have to make do with those men, however. They are all Konoha can spare these days. He paused, his eyes flickering along the river. I am sure Hiruzen will be smiling on you during this mission. To see you with real responsibility was a long-held dream of his. Make Konoha proud, Uzumaki. Make him proud. I snorted. Maybe I shouldn't have, given that Danzo would decide who gets to wear the hat after him, but I couldn't help it. That Danzo himself wasn't the best at giving motivational speeches gave me some comfort. With all due respect, sir, there's no need to invoke the Sandaime every time you speak to me. He's not a motivational tool. I'll do my job and won't bungle it, and that's that. He shrugged, unashamed. The wistful sheen in his eyes hardened back to its former cold gray. If you say so, Uzumaki. In that case there is nothing left to talk about. Make sure this becomes a successful campaign. He hit the ground with the butt of his cane, no doubt heard by every onlooker. An ANBU covertly touched his shoulder, then all 3 shined away. A show front to back. That was all right though. He kept the boat from capsizing. I'd be an ungrateful bastard not to be thankful for that much at least. The bridge was empty again but for me and Hinata. We stood across each other silently, and for all I wanted to say, all that needed to be said, my lips stayed sealed. Eventually Hinata stepped up to me and took one of my hands into hers without meeting my eyes. Hinata. She shook her head before looking up at me. Her hands were trembling around my ungainly paw. She was holding it together, barely. Hinata. I began again, but her grip on my hand became so tight that I stopped myself from saying anything else. You promise, she said. That was all. Those words hanging between us, she let go of my hand and left me alone on the bridge, leaving with hurried steps. I heard no sobs or anything, but my sight had always been good, and I had seen the shimmering in her eye when she turned. Before long she was out of sight, vanishing into the rows of houses. I had made my girl cry after all, and she hadn't even been able to stomach crying in front of me. I ran my hand through my hair and stared up at the sun, which bore down on me with Konoha's usual summer heat. How's that for an Uzumaki, huh? I might become the Godaime soon enough, but I sure as hell couldn't recall another time where I had felt as useless. When I left through the gate to assume my command, the Chunin on guard duty sent me off with warm smiles and good-natured wishes for success. That day I envied those bastards more than I had ever anyone else in my life. Chapter 4. We have cleared most of the rubble away, sir. Miko's voice was firm. She was a Chunin, about 16, and fresh in the game. Barring any unforeseen events, this should have been the last chamber. As you can see, it has been damaged quite heavily. I don't know if we can make any use of the equipment. So far she'd done a bang-up job of hiding the horror any sane person had to feel after discovering one of Orochimaru's labs. I studied her face, repeated her name in my head to remember it better, and joined it in my mind to the long-sleeved red shirt she wore under her vest. Then I turned to the hall we had entered half a minute ago. Intestine-like tubes, gurneys specked with dried blood, broken machines, corpses, half-destroyed filing cabinets with labeled body parts, shards of glass. I had seen worse, but not often. Half of the roof had caved in, letting through strings of sunlight that gave the place an otherworldly aura. It's not a pretty place, I said. But then, you wouldn't expect it to be, given whose haunt it was. No, sir. Miko kept her composure. The thread holding it together was thinning out, though. If you moved into a place, you were likely to find signs of whoever had lived there before you. When I had rented my new apartment, the reek of smoke had still clung to the yellowed wallpaper. Likewise, I'd left more than one word scratched into the plaster of my old one. Orochimaru's signature, it turned out, came in blood and horror. Later I'd have to scrub my mind clean of those images. Danzo should have become a real estate broker. He'd really given us the best plot of land for our base of operations. I had been in grass for 3 weeks now, and no day passed without finding stuff from Orochimaru lying around. He had loved his winding tunnels and rooms and hallways, always patterned, always curling in on themselves like snakes. Orochimaru had screwed over generations of shinobi, but I had to admit that few could compare to his flair for style. Still, I wouldn't have gotten a wink of sleep had I made his basement my bedroom. Down here, we cooked and ate, stored our supplies, and held larger meetings. Our sleeping quarters were under the open sky. A neat ring of dozens of tents staggered around the entrance to this hideout. Clear out everything that isn't medical equipment, and then clean the place. I paused, fishing for names. Maru and Takashi take a look at the machines. I want to know what they are. If they're valuable, repair them or salvage the good parts. At Miko's grimace, I said, You don't like that order? She looked caught. I'm sorry, sir. It's just. I'd much rather burn it all to the ground and forget it ever existed. You wouldn't be the first one. But have you ever tried really hard not to think about something? Often enough. Did it work? She hesitated. No, sir. I don't think it did. It'll be the same here, believe me. Just torching the place won't change anything. You've got to get to the root of things and start there by changing what it means to you. Jiraiya's wisdom had served me well before. Maybe it'd do the same for her. Miko squinted at me. I had her attention, but not her understanding. How do you mean? I gestured at the gurneys. What is this place? What happened in here? Human experiments. Torture. Maybe worse stuff. I don't know. I put a hand on her shoulder. Easy there, Miko. That's good enough. Now, what is the opposite of all that? It took her a moment. Her face scrunched up, then her eyes popped out. She turned to the machines, to the corners that were yet full of corpses and tubes, and back around. You can't be serious, sir? A med bay? Here? I grinned at her. First order, get out Orochimaru's stuff. Second order, get out his stink, repair the roof, and make this place our own. Now get to it. You'll have all the help you need from Maru and Takashi. If you need supplies, speak to the quartermaster. Rubbing my hands, I left Miko to her new task. The day I'd made Orochimaru's throne room our mess hall, and his personal chamber our kitchen, had found a special place in my heart. Now I could also add the med bay to that gallery of good moments. With rebels hanging around and Iwa sure to move soon, I knew I'd have to front-load a fair share of those. Outside, shinobi sat in front of their tents, enjoying the respite from their guard duty in the sun. They scribbled into their diaries, prepared seals for combat, or talked with their comrades about everything and nothing. A group on hunting duty carried spits with boars past me. A trio of new chunin walked right behind them, bellyaching while holding twigs and small branches. They wanted action, yet all they got was firewood. 3 tents farther, a kunoichi had made brewing coffee into an art. Only 2 decades ago it had been an expensive delight in Konoha, something you got when you had a lot of cash to throw around, a sign of status, if nothing else. But ever since the war started and our relationship with Suna increased as a result of our alliance, those beans had become available for cheap in the village. The unsealed glass apparatus she used for brewing would fit right into Orochimaru's lab, but that was a small price to pay for the smell wafting over from her tent, a smell that consistently had the whole camp stand in line each morning, ready to part with their money. As the commanding officer, I could jump the line for my cup, a privilege I normally made heavy use of. Since the day was slow, however, I took my time for once and waited orderly in line, chatting with my men. At first they were hesitant, but that had never stopped me before. I had made clear at the beginning that I expected them to follow the chain of command, but I wasn't about to shy away from personal bonds with them. That wasn't my style, and it wasn't how you got cohesion in a team either. Meaning no disrespect, sir, one of them said eventually, but I think I see you at this tent more often than any other person. It's the best coffee around, I said. My head spinning after the second cup. A kunoichi said behind us. You're here far more often, sir. Are you sure all that caffeine's good for your heart? What would your wife say? She asked with a cheeky smile. I said, she'll never learn of it if you know what's good for you. Before breaking into a grin. Here, sir. The kunoichi actually brewing the coffee said, handing me a cup. Thanks, Ainu. I made space for the others and took up position next to the tent, blowing at the curling steam while watching the steady flux of shinobi come and go. Our base was situated in a forest in the southernmost part of Grass. From here, the woods stretched all the way up to a chain of hills to the north, which lay adjacent to Mount Hibiko, a giant whose scraggy top dipped into the clouds. I'd seen no names for the hills on my maps, but since you'd have a hard time finding a path up Mount Hibiko without them, I took to calling them the Divine Footstool. Sir? A bearded Chunin, Shurin, I think, appeared next to me. What is it, Shurin? His shoulders straightened. One of our scout teams hasn't called in yet. Their return was scheduled for 2 hours ago. 2 hours isn't that much yet. They could have been delayed by the locals at Aimi. I'll look into it. The moment he saluted, I gave Ainu back the cup and started walking. Aimi was a city to the north, close to the country center. It was only 2 decades old, but these days people considered it the capital of Grass. The former capital, razed during the Third War, lay only a few miles west, its ruinous towers still peeking out above the forest. They were twins, these cities, one broken, the other an imitation. Who knew how long that replacement would last? My first act as a commander had been to send out scouts to every corner of Grass. The news they brought back was less than optimal. The clans loyal to Orochimaru were rising, while Iwa had started to move into the northwest. 2 headaches, I was sure, that wouldn't take long until they became migraines. So far, no one had died though, and I intended to keep it that way. I arrived at a brown tent some distance away from the others, which was leaning against a tree. As I made my way through the high grass, I could make out a buzzing and whirring from inside. Shima, it's me, I called. I'm coming in. I ducked through the flap and into a black tornado of bugs and other creepers whirling in the middle of the tent. There was a click of a tongue, then they all shot past me, leaving me alone with Aburaim Shima. Each of her ears was pierced from the lobe up to the upper rim, starting with an egg, moving to a caterpillar, a cocoon, and finally a small butterfly. She was chewing gum, a remnant of her time serving under Ginma, which ought to make you more relaxed by default. What do you wish of me, sir? I need you to speak with your bugs. The team to Aimi hasn't returned yet. Aimi is far away, sir. If I locate them, I won't be able to track anyone else until tomorrow. Do it anyway. I'll switch up your schedule so you can get some rest afterwards. Shima closed her eyes and flew through hand seals. Her brow trembled. She released a pulse of chakra which at first expanded at the speed of a snail, then thinned out and accelerated. Soon it had cleared the camp, leaving my perception. When the wave of chakra rushed back into her a moment later, it took the strength right out of her. She collapsed into my waiting arms, and I put her down onto her bedroll. She looked up at me, her face sweaty and flushed. They aren't moving, sir, she gasped out. Are they still at Aimi? Shima shook her head. An hour east of it. Her eyes were falling shut. Thank you, I said. I'll let you get some rest. Thank you, sir, Shima mumbled, on the verge of falling asleep. Once I had left her place, I made a beeline to my tent, my stomach tied in knots. I'd already made plans what to do in case my team was stuck in Aimi. Chief among my thoughts had been going there to bust jaws until I found them. That they were an hour east of the city, unmoving, made things even worse. Inside my tent, a clone had worn circles like rutted cart tracks into the earth while thinking up speeches. After dispelling it, I received bits and pieces that might be useful. Most of the clone's time had been taken up thinking about my father though, and what kinds of speeches he must have given. That explained the melancholic look as it popped, then. My desk was littered with open scrolls, my choppy, unrefined handwriting like a neon sign on all of them. On the straw-covered floor, crumpled sheets of paper had formed a little mound. All of them were failed attempts at writing Hinata. I just wasn't any good at putting words to paper. If only I still had Irika to help me write, like he'd done when I wrote Gigi to wish him a happy birthday. I'd never seen the old man that happy before. He'd even framed the damn thing and put it in his office. But I had no time to dwell in that memory any longer. I swiped most of the scrolls off the table, looking for the map buried beneath them. When I found it, I located Aimi, and then looked for what lay east of it. I was searching for a village, anything that could explain an impromptu stop. All I found was forests, though. Nothing but woods. Which meant there was no sufficiently benign explanation for a sudden stop. An attack then? But was it Iwa or the clans? Probably the clans. Iwa had yet to really move into Grass. I left the tent, giving a sharp whistle. Immediately, a Chunin was running up to me. Sir? I'm leaving the camp for Aimi. Shurin is second in command until my return. For Aimi, sir? Have the scouts not returned yet? I'll bring them home. He was short, hurrying alongside me and trying to keep my pace. Team 12 is fully operational right now, sir. Let me get them in. There's no time. I'm going alone. Let the men rest, they've earned it. Sir? You have your orders. I left him with those words, jumping the palisade, ringing the camp, then blasting off toward Aimi. Speed was of the essence, and I trusted very few people among my troops to keep up with me. I leapt through the forest at breakneck speed, occasionally coating myself with a fine layer of wind chakra to shear through foliage. At such a pace, sounds grew strange. I heard the rushing wind, punctuated by outcries of animals that stopped a split second later once I was past the source. My thoughts circled the scout team. Every time the idea that they could be dead popped up, I suppressed it ruthlessly. Involuntarily, though, I saw their faces as they had left for Aimi yesterday, and I remembered what little information I had about them. 2 had kids. 1 was divorced, the other had a civilian wife waiting for him in Konoha. The 3rd and 4th weren't in a relationship as far as I knew. But they too had family back in Konoha. Younger siblings, parents, grandparents. They couldn't just die. People don't simply die like that. How would I even justify it if I had to write letters of condolence to their families? No, they weren't dead. At this point, the information they had gathered in Aimi was secondary. I would get them home, to camp. Everything else was inexcusable. I found them, just as Shima had said, about an hour east of Aimi. When I located the bodies, hidden in a brush like random trash, I had a second where my heart seemed to stop. Then I pulled them out and knelt beside the first one. He had a few scrapes. Worse, though, were his purple fingernails and the bubbly spit around his lips. I leaned down to his chest. His heart was still beating. I confirmed it with the others too. They had been poisoned and then been left to die. That was definitely not an IWA method. The clans, then? There could be no other explanation. I tried to remember what Irika had taught me about poisons, but all I knew was that I knew barely anything. One time, however, on a joint mission, Sakura had made Kiba puke to get toxins out of him. I called up 3 clones. Each took position next to another member of the patrol. We rolled them around so they wouldn't suffocate on their own barf, and then put our fingers to work. It was ugly, stank to hell and back, and my hand was sticky, but after a short while my clones and I had managed to make all of them vomit. That done, everyone lifted one member on their shoulder, and we set off for camp in a hurried pace. I had no idea if the vomiting helped, and wouldn't take any more chances. They needed a medic need, and a good one at that. When I arrived at camp, Shikamaru, my old squad, and a slew of reinforcements had arrived in the meanwhile. They stood around at the gate as if they had come in just moments earlier than me. When they saw me with 4 bodies, Izuna and Shikamaru ran up to me. I found them in the forest. They're poisoned. Izuna, patched them up. I made them vomit already. Get someone to show you the way to the current med bay. The new one is still under construction. If you need help, there are 3 other medic need. The rest of you, put up your tents and then get something to eat in the mess hall, down into the tunnel system and straight through. You'll find the way. Shikamaru, walk with me. Shikamaru fell in beside me, his face impassive even as his eyes were jumping around, taking in the camp, no doubt calculating improvements in layout, guard shifts, and overall procedure. Once we reached the camp's outer edge and I was sure no one was watching us, I clasped his forearm and pulled him into a hug. It lasted only a second, but God, had I missed seeing a familiar face. Shikamaru snorted. I see you've taken my advice. I wonder why you can't do that every other time as well. Because this one makes sense. The other times it didn't. After Shikamaru had explained why, as a commander, showing too much affection to one soldier and not to another was bad, I had always kept things like this private. With him nearby I relaxed though. Another brain was here now that could take care of an emergency. I'd become tenser than I first thought in those 3 weeks without him. And the patrol business just now had done the rest. I said, Believe me, man, it's good seeing you and the others. Although you came 3 days earlier than expected. It took a while for some of our reinforcements to come back from their missions, but Danzo sent us out the moment we were complete, picking up some more people along the way. Shikamaru heaved a sigh. Everyone but our old squad hasn't had time off in a while now. It's troublesome, but our leave means nothing to the man. I noticed. But I'm glad you're here anyway. There was no one I'd rather have at my side during problematic times. And today had turned out to be quite problematic. The thought wiped the smile right off my face. I prayed that Sakura had taught Izuna enough to patch them up. Once I found out who exactly had done it, I'd tear them to shreds for it. Shikamaru seemed to know what was going through my mind. We have to wait for them to wake up to be sure, but I doubt this was Iiwa, he said. Poison isn't their style. I had the same thought. As we began walking again, he resumed more quietly. Can you fill me in on the details so far? I only had a little time to read the reports of the situation, and I might have slept through a briefing or two. I arched an eyebrow. Had something else on your mind? I felt myself relax a little, the tenseness leaving my shoulders. Maybe, he said. I shook my head. This is going to be a fair deal. Information for information. I fill you in if you do the same. He seemed willing to protest at first, but then relented. Ino came back to Konoha. I could see from his expression that he wouldn't say a word more than that, and he didn't have to, really. No, he said. What's going on here? We've got two problems. Iwa and the clans. The last one is worrying me the most right now. I'd be surprised if they weren't the ones behind the poison. Not afraid of Iwa? I shrugged. Iwa has had some trouble lately. Even if Waterfall belongs to them now, the resistance isn't dead, and they're giving Iwa a good fight up there. I've no doubts Iwa will make a move in grass. They've started to get the ball rolling already, but from the reports it'll take them a while yet, even though Waterfall is bordering us. For now I expect only a few skirmishes, nothing major. With some luck we'll have a good hold on this place before any of the real fighting happens. Which leaves the clans. Were all of them loyal to Orochimaru? Pretty much. We had come to the center of the camp and were nearing the entrance to the tunnel system. It's strange, for sure, but he kept them safe. He was almost like a god to them. That's what those shrines were. Oh, so you've seen them? Do you like them? Not much, no. I shared that sentiment. Take any path leading through grass and eventually you'd come by a small shrine shaped like a snake, some offerings and lit candles in front of it. To the locals, Orochimaru had been a deity, a protective element. Sure, you had to sacrifice some people here and there to pacify him, but what were a few lives compared to grass for once not made a plaything in shinobi wars? To them he was a hero. Vicious, yes, and unpredictable too, but his presence alone had kept us away from this place for years. The question was if those beliefs extended past the general population. The clans should know better. But Orochimaru had always also held a lot of sway over shinobi. Lit by sconces, the tunnel stretched away from us. Our shadows leapt across the floor like angry vipers when the wind gusted, setting the flames to shiver. Even with a caved-in ceiling here and there to let in fresh air, the place was still suffused with a musty, damp smell. I clicked my tongue. You know, I've tried to understand how anyone can send their children to Orochimaru for training, no matter how beneficial he was to them. It seems obvious that's a bad idea. Who'd trust that guy? You met him, right? I think you said so when you were skirting grass a year ago. Shikamaru's face was half-shadowed. Briefly. We hightailed it out of there. Luckily he didn't pursue us beyond the border. He could have gotten to us, though. He seemed strangely protective of grass. It was a troublesome thing all around. The debriefing took weeks. Psychological evaluations, medical checkups even though we barely had a scrape to our names, and dozens of meetings with the brass. I can't remember the last time I slept as little. Until Ino came along, eh? He shot me a look that told me to back off, and I abided, temporarily. Anyway, I said, I've asked around and talked to some folks who had missions in grass some years back, before Orochimaru came by. Turns out the system they used in grass made taking over quite easy for him. Shikamaru tilted his head. I can't recall ever learning about that with Irika. What's the system like? You mentioned clans. Centralized? Have they got something akin to the Hokage? No to both, I said as we arrived at the meeting hall. It was empty except for a huge map I had hung at the southern wall, and the chair I had carried in so I could sit and stare at the map for hours. With Shikamaru here I hoped to drastically cut down on that time. His brain should be much more suited for this kind of work. The clans are scattered all over grass, I said. Before Orochimaru came into the picture and centralized the power structure, they only had a loose form of kinship with one another. I'm sure some clans were stronger than others, but for the most part they'd only meet twice a year on some kind of summit to discuss important things and exchange genin. Apparently you'd never have two members from the same clan on one team. It got the kids around and gave them a chance to learn about more than their clan. They also served wonderfully as hostages, I presume, Shikamaru said. I guess. I'd think twice about plotting against other clans if I knew some of my kids are with them. Shikamaru made a low sound in his throat. If the clans are up to their old methods, we might be able to capitalize on that. That's why I brought it up. They'll be meeting up soon for another summit. All of them? Clan heads and bodyguards, I'd say. The problem is that so far we have no idea where the little get-together is supposed to take place. The team and Aimi, The one I'd brought in earlier was supposed to find that out. You think they've been found out, then, and that's why they were poisoned? It's likely, yes. I have faith in Izuna, though. Once they wake up, they might have more information. Shikamaru crossed his arms, letting his eyes wander around the map. He was coming up with plans, calculating the actions of all parties involved. Sooner or later he would arrive at some conclusion, which probably involved my own plans as well. I had a fair idea of what I wanted to do with the knowledge of where the clans were going to meet. And of every shinobi alive today, Shikamaru knew me by far the best. Perhaps even better than Hinata. He'd suss it out soon enough. We stood silent for a good while, now and then hearing shinobi pass us by in the tunnels outside, their footfalls and voices coming and receding like the tide. Presently Shikamaru turned to me, his face set in fierce disapproval. As expected, he had divined my intention in no time at all, and without my telling him. Absolutely not, he said mulishly. Since I was the commander, I had the benefit of raising my eyebrow at his outburst. You can't be serious, he went on. Alone? I rolled my eyes. Who else in this camp got my chances at survival if this goes pear-shaped? It's the best way. Even in the dim torchlight the angry flush on his face was visible. That's flat-out suicide. It is, in fact, the worst, most troublesome idea you've ever had since we started serving together, and you had a fair few of those. Come now, that's a lie and you know it. I only want to talk to them. If we get to an understanding with the clans, our main problem is gone, and we can fully focus on Iwa. This'll be the only time I can speak to all of them at once. You'll be alone with dozens of angry clan members. They'll poison you before you get a single word in. Having a Konohanin listening to them should be novel enough to at least last me through a sentence or two. The reply was out before I could think it over. Shikamaru's brow lowered. He didn't appreciate the humor. Well, too bad for him. I had 3 poison shinobi in my medbay while I was damn well immune to most any toxins they could throw at me. If anything, the past hour and the debacle with Haru had shown me that some missions were simply too dangerous for any shinobi without my constitution. I wouldn't let myself be talked out of a plan again by an argument for my security. Last time that could have ended horribly. And if I managed to sway the clans, I could avoid situations like today entirely. Of all the weapons at a shinobi's disposal, I despised poison the most. Call it stupid, but I found it cowardly. It went against everything I believed in, and I had a few arguments about it with Sakura in my lifetime. Konoha killed Orochimaru, remember? Shikamaru said. Their newfound god. They lived without one before. How entrenched can their belief really be? I can't just let this opportunity pass by. We won't get another like it for a long time to come. And anyway, what would you have me do instead? I know what every other commander would do. Spell it out then, I said. Don't be shy. But you're hesitating. You hate what every other commander would have done just as much as I do. Where has assassinating everyone in our way got us so far, huh? They hate our guts. Their children hate our guts. And I've got no trouble whatsoever to believe their grandchildren will also hate our guts once they're born. I shook my head. I'll fight them if I have to, but I won't kill off anyone before talking to them. Given what Konoha and Iwa have done to this place, they've earned at least that much courtesy. I get that, Shikamaru huffed. I do, troublesome as it is. But at least don't go alone? You've got an army of capable people here. Take some with you. At least a detail of 5, that's all I'm asking. 5 shinobi, jonin, and then you can try talking them into peace. You think the clans will appreciate a squad of jonin on their front porch? That's cutting my speaking time from 2 sentences to half a comma. Again, levity didn't do anything. Heat was rising to my cheeks. It would put the squad at too much of a risk when I can just as well take care of it on my own. Especially because I was nearly immune to every poison imaginable. I might get a rash for half an hour, nothing more. Besides, it'll have a higher chance of making them think I'm there as a peaceful envoy. I'll even wear a white sash. I already got one, and it goes great with the vest. The flush had left Shikamaru's face, replaced by a chalky whiteness as if he had seen Orochimaru rise up behind me. I knew he was only concerned for me, but as far as I could see, this was the safest way for everyone. I appreciate the concern, but I won't change the plan. I'll go, talk to them, and get out. If it comes to a fight, I'll just flood the place with clones and get out a bit sooner, that's all. You're impossible, he said, shaking his head. Just impossible. How? He was clenching his fists. He stared at me, his eyes dark pins of anger. Damn, Naruto, you're a father now. You've got Hinata and Chia waiting for you. Are you trying to kill yourself before you see them again? Are you actually trying to weasel out of your responsibilities? My jaw clenched. What the hell are you saying? I growled. What have they got to do with anything we just talked about? Well, what else am I supposed to think? You're supposed to leave them out of this. Why even bring them up? Is this the next thing going into a letter to my wife? His accusation had rattled me, and I was barely thinking about what I was saying at that point. Just because you found yourself a girl doesn't mean that we can start taking it easy now. There'll always be danger. Don't let Ino get into your thinking. You're a shinobi. Shikamaru stood silent and slack-jawed. Then he looked me evenly in the eyes. I'll excuse myself for now, sir. I still have to put up my tent. Call me when there is anything strategic you want my input on. He went past me into the tunnel system and left me standing in the briefing room with those words. My mind was blank for minutes after as I kept looking at the map, asking myself what the hell had just happened between us. My nights, which had seen me waking up bathed in sweat at random times before, didn't get any better in the 4 days after my spat with Shikamaru. Every morning when I went to the barrel outside my tent to wash my face, I could admire a deepening in the bags under my eyes. If they got any blacker, I'd soon be able to mask them as sunglasses and become an aburame. I was eating less, yawning more, and had taken to drinking a cup or two at night so I could tease my tired body into sleep. How had Gigi done it? What was Danzo's trick right now? I had no idea. The vest I wore wasn't even the red and white of the Hokage, and already it was dragging at me. Ironically, the whole operation would have been derailed during those days if not for Shikamaru. He was doing his duty with cold precision. He refined patrol schedules, held daily meetings with the quartermaster, planned out new routes for our scouts, and thought up plans to consolidate Konoha's power in grass, all laziness gone in an instant. When we spoke, it was only in an official capacity though. Bland, in a word, and devoid of any warmth. The rest of our squad had noticed, of course, but so far they had kept their thoughts to themselves and didn't get involved. I couldn't blame them. I was quick to anger since my fallout with Shikamaru. Presently, I sat atop a branch, watching the sunrise and reading in the diary of the girl. In a strange way, I found the act of reading soothing. It calmed me and gave me a chance to slip away from this pressure, if only for a moment. The relationship between the girl and Rashi was quite similar to the one I'd had with Kakashi. We had gone through the same stages of dislike until we somehow landed on friendship. I also knew her name now. Kuratsuchi. Her handwriting had gotten more refined over the entries, which sometimes had months between them. Yesterday I drank my first cup of sake, which quickly became a bottle. Rashi is still laughing at my headache. I can hear him from the other room. He had a lot of fun introducing me to this beastly drink. But what was I supposed to do? Grandfather won't give us any of the more dangerous missions, even though Rashi asked him to, and I begged him for it. It's ridiculous. Why have me trained, only to then relegate me to nothing more challenging than a B rank? I can take any of his guards and beat them into the ground. They'd never see it coming. And yet I'm still stuck here on lousy missions. Rashi laughs at me when I complain, but I know he isn't any better. I asked grandfather about it. Rashi was going to pieces before I arrived on his doorstep. Iwa had made him the sharpest weapon in its history, and just when he was ready, the 10-nen treaty came along, and with it peace. There was no use for him anymore, no purpose. I'm glad I came when I did. Unwittingly, grandfather did a good thing there, that stubborn old man. I wouldn't have wanted for Rashi to suffer anymore. I think he's in a better place now. I put down the diary. I'd had an inkling before, but this entry confirmed it. Kuratsuchi's grandfather wasn't just a friend of Rashi, or a higher up in Iwa's hierarchy as I had first thought. He was the damned Chuchikage himself. I had never heard about him having a family. Had it been kept under wraps? I was still thinking about the implications of this find, when Subaru appeared on the branch next to me. His Byakugan made me think of home, even though it was set in a copper-cast face and very professional. I really should make another attempt at finishing that letter. Yes? Sir, I know it is not my place, but... When he fumbled his words, looking awkwardly at the horizon, I became curious despite myself. Was this really the day I would get an emotional intervention from a Hyuga that wasn't Hinata? He resumed. I assume you have your reasons for the dispute with Nara-san, but the current divide between you makes it hard to keep my promise to Hinata-sama. It is also starting to affect the overall morale of the troops, and excuse me for saying so, that is inexcusable on a campaign this important. Subaru's fingers twitched up to the bone talisman around his neck, but he stopped himself before showing such an overt motion. I looked blankly at him. Your promise to Hinata? He nodded. She tasked me with keeping you and, to a lesser extent, Nara-san safe. The higher our morale, and the stronger your bond, the easier this becomes. A broken chain is no use to anyone. I would not want to fail her. There was some real zest in that last statement, enough to make a guy squint a little to see if someone was trying to hit on his wife. But I let it slide. Hinata was incredibly popular with the Branch family, and my focus lay entirely on the part where my wife had ordered one of my soldiers to keep me, his commander, safe. I was getting angry again, not the least because I had been sleepless all night. I forced all of that down. An argument had estranged me from Shikamaru already. I didn't want to add Subaru to that. "Thank you for bringing the question of morale to my attention," I said. "I'll keep it in mind. Now, if there is nothing else." Subaru shook his head. He looked glad to leave me alone, leaping down to a lower branch and out of sight. I sat watching the orange cast of the sky. A flight of birds shaped like an arrowhead went by. I couldn't believe Hinata had done that. It wasn't just about having my authority undermined, and it did plenty of that, but I had promised her that I would come back. How long had this been going on? My mind went to the night of our talk, and the letters she mentioned she got from Subaru and Shikamaru. Had they always been keeping an eye on me, trying to protect me? Mission after mission, there had been so many times when Shikamaru wanted to put me into less dangerous positions, tried to get others on my team to take the risk instead. My jaw started to hurt from the way I was grinding my teeth. Small wonder he didn't want me to go this time either. Hinata had given him a nice mandate about it. He would vote against anything that was even remotely dangerous, even though 0 deaths were numbers hard to argue with. I also couldn't help but think of my father. I was sure my mother had never asked another shinobi to keep an eye on him. And why should she? Had they all lost faith in me that easily? I got to my feet and glared down at the foliage. If not for Subaru and his new religion, which compelled him to always speak his mind, I wouldn't have learned of this. This could have continued for years and years, and I would have been none the wiser. "Sir?" I wheeled around to Izuna, who had appeared behind me. She took a reflexive step back and I had to get a grip on myself. This no-sleep thing was really doing me no favors. "What is it, Izuna?" "The first member of the patrol has woken up for a moment before falling back asleep," she reported, her lithe body stiff as a board, much like Sakura had been at that age. She tried to hide it behind professionalism, but I could see the concern in her eyes. Tired to the bone, eyes ringed and unshaved, I must have made quite a sight. "Has he said anything?" She nodded, conflicted. "I couldn't get him to stop talking and rest. He said to tell you quickly. Their mission was a success. They overheard that the clans will be meeting in 5 days' time at the base of Mount Hibiko." 5 days, I murmured, running the calculations in my head. "That leaves us with about a day. Doable, but not worth anything anymore. If the clans poisoned them after being spied on, they won't just leave their plans as is. They'll have made some changes on the off chance the information gets through." "It might not have been the clans, sir. I extracted and then analyzed the poison in their systems. It isn't one commonly used in grass. Sakura-sama drilled me on those fairly extensively," she added with pride. "And while the poison itself doesn't have an origin per se, its ingredients do. The majority of them can be traced back to the western lowlands of Iiwa, a region called Kagan." I could have given the girl a hug right then. She was a rookie and green as the sky was blue, but God if Sakura hadn't turned out a fine shinobi there. A little more experience, and Izuna would become a nightmare for Konoha's enemies. In any case, her information changed everything. Yes, it was concerning that Iiwa had advanced its own scouts that far into grass already, but that could be dealt with later. Important was that I still had a chance to convince the clans of working with us, or if that was asking too much, then at least not working with Iiwa. "You did a good job getting them back to health, Izuna," I said, barely containing my giddiness. It seemed to take some of her earlier concern away, because her lips pulled into a shy smile. "Thank you, sir. Now listen, I'll have to hurry if I want to get there in time." "You are going there alone, sir?" she asked, wide-eyed. I nodded. "It's a dangerous gig, too dangerous for most in this camp. Anyway, inform Shikamaru of the situation, but also tell him that under no circumstance is he to send people after me. Tell him it is a direct order from a superior officer." She was reluctant, but I left her little choice in the matter. I told her again that she had done a good job with her patients, then panned my gaze across the foliage to the divine footstool in the north, the 3 hills at the base of Mount Hibiko. That would be where they were going to meet, huh? Well, there was no party like a party with an Uzumaki in it, and I'd make damn sure to liven up their meeting. Chapter 5. As the evening sun began shining through the canopy, I arrived in front of the waterfall that marked the territory of the divine footstool. From atop the trees back at camp, the footstool had always looked like 2 hills rising in front, speckled with soft grass, and a third one, narrow but taller, snuggling up to the mountain behind. No doubt, Jiraiya would have described them as 2 butt cheeks pressing themselves against the pole. Now, though, standing in front of the bluff, I looked at nothing but solid rock. Instead of soft grass, only some hardy shrubbery grew out between the granite framing the waterfall, and the footstool struck me more as a pair of scraped knees than a nice booty. I ordered a few dozen clones to spread out and disguise themselves as plants and rocks, which would pop themselves as soon as a group of kusanin came by. The area to cover proved quite large. My clones had the tendency to get weaker and more loony the farther away they were from me, but since their only job was suicide, they'd managed just fine. I had moved at a fast clip to reach the footstool, so I still had some time to make myself presentable. If marrying a Hyuga had taught me anything, then it was that I couldn't talk to clan elders looking like a bum. I took off my vest, peeled myself out of my shirt, and washed myself in the cold river. Fish leapt to and fro, leaving, for only a second, arcs of glistening spray in the air between us. The summer heat dared me to take a plunge, but I had to hurry on. I went to a spot where the choppy water smoothed out, and the groves of birches clustering at the banks found their mirror image instead of becoming hideously distorted. While shaving myself with a kunai, I inspected the dark pockets under my eyes. Illusions weren't an option. With my limited ability at genjutsu, they'd sniff it out in a second. I came prepared though. Watching myself in the water, I followed Ino's instructions, put on foundation, and then went to town with a concealer. The result looked neat enough. Little remained of my dark circles. I whispered a quick thanks to Ino, then forced my mind in a different direction. When I thought of her, I thought of Shikamaru. I couldn't have that right now. As I was tying the white sash around my hips, one of my clones popped itself. Time to go. I found the kusanin close by and hid in the trees to observe the group of 9. None of them old geezers like those mummies Hamura and Koharu, whose continued survival had puzzled me for years now. From the way some of them gravitated around others, I made out at least 3 clan leaders: a fat, bald man lugging around a keg strapped to his back, a tall fellow with a long neck, easily doubling my height, and a woman with rust-red hair long enough to be done up and braided while still looping past her waist. She was talking with the other 2 leaders, who nodded deferentially, then glared at one another over her head. Interesting. So she was the true force to be reckoned with in that formation. Once the group got past the steep, rocky bluff, the leftmost hill of the footstool turned more hospitable. A system of interwoven streams and lakes, covered in grass and ferns, broke up the landscape. 4 more groups joined the kusanin as we neared the northern parts, swelling their numbers to 20 all in all. I ignored the murky feeling in my chest and kept tailing them. Up the steep, narrow paths we went, alongside the third and last hill of the footstool, until we came to a point where the grass ended and all the bushes and trees stopped growing. It had gotten darker and darker as the night went on. The moon was only a sliver in the sky, not much of a help to me, and soon I couldn't see my hand in front of my eyes. I would have lost my target if not for the noise they made while talking. Without light, they took to a set of stairs hewn into the side of the mountain, their chatter a monotone buzz ahead. I had to slow down at the stairs and find my footing. The first minutes went all right, but then the path led me between steep ridge walls, and their voices were bouncing around, coming from here now, and then from there a second later. I couldn't see them anymore, and barely knew where I was stepping. My hand brushed against the wall to my right, making sure I wouldn't wander off and fall into a ravine. On it went, my feet becoming sure of themselves again. This wasn't so bad, after all. You could get used to anything with enough pluck. When my right hand grabbed air instead of rock, I stopped. Pitch black darkness hovered next to me. From above came an explosive laugh, rumbling between the mountains like thunder. I stilled, waiting for the laughter to subside. My heart was beating hard. At least it wasn't raining. I made sure of how broad the way was, then kept advancing in a low crouch, feeling my way forward. Once, Gigi had taken me to a wandering circus passing Konoha, telling me that all the acrobatic feats we saw that day were expected from a student entering the academy. Months later I had still been trying to balance on a taut clothesline, my eyes closed, falling off every other attempt. I'd been a shinobi for more than a decade now. Half a mile of free fall on either side was nothing to me. The noise guiding me became quieter, then ceased altogether. I pushed forward. Hewing stairs into mountains was the kind of task you avoided doing more than once. This had to be the only path. Their meeting place would come up eventually. Besides, I wouldn't be able to look Shikamaru in the eyes if, after all the hay I'd made about this mission, I got lost on the way. Say nothing of Hinata and Chia. Looking incompetent to them would be the worst. Half an hour later my feet were treading grass again, and I found light at the horizon. I snuck through the underbrush up to a walled compound that lay adjacent to a tarn, its central building multi-storied. Voices rang out from the garden, and the clinking of cups. A bamboo pipe was filling, then emptying out while insects buzzed around. From farther away sounded a splash, as if someone was throwing stones into the tarn. I adjusted the white sash, then walked out of my hiding place. A shinobi not much older than Azuna was leaning against the wall, chewing on a toothpick. He must have felt secure in this location. He only noticed me when I was standing in front of him. While he drew a kunai with jagged edges, I sent out a pulse of chakra, alerting the people inside that I was willing to join the festivities. A blink later, 9 leaders were glaring at me. 2 more seconds, then their escorts arrived as well, crowding the front gate. Konoha, the tall man murmured, chakra gathering under his skin. Will you do the honors, Kikasama, or shall I? He asked the lady with the complicated hair. Screw this, IGA, there's no one here wants to see you do your weird tricks. The fat man said instead, slapping his stomach before shouldering his barrel. No need to trouble Kikasama either. I'll give him a quick and fiery grave, and he'll be grateful to have experienced the mercy of the Uma clan. I ignored them butting heads and addressed the woman they called Kiku. I'm not here to start trouble, if that's what you're worried about. Uma wheeled away from his adversary, his stupendous belly filling with air. I'll give you trouble, you. Stop this, Uma, Kiku said. You as well, IGA. Such behavior is unbecoming of the clans. As for you, she said to me, the word of a Konohanin holds little worth. You need not start trouble, you are trouble. Identify yourself. I'm the commander of Konoha's forces in grass, Uzumaki Naruto. A few eyes widened at the name, while someone farther back sucked in their breath, then muttered. Konoha's thousand face. The introduction was about to set off Uma and Ig again, but a look from Kika kept them quiet. The clans were more centralized than the reports had made them out to be. I patted my hip. I'm only here to talk. I even prepared this spiffy sash for the occasion. Kika narrowed her eyes. That thing is a garment, nothing more. It's mostly a sign that I'm here for diplomacy, not war. If this were a trap, this place would be torched down already, with dozens swarming out to find any survivors. But that's not my style, and honestly, I think most of my predecessors bundled things up majestically for all of us. That's why I'm here. To talk. To make sure that won't happen again. And what if we don't like talking to scum like you? IGA said, his voice cold and precise. I shrugged. If you keep attacking Konohanin, I'll retaliate. I'd rather it doesn't come to this, but I'm a shinobi, and I've got my mission, you know how this works. You little shit! Uma was on the move again, keg ready. I still had no idea what he used it for. Maybe he was a drunk with a large appetite. I'll blaze you. Kiku raised her hand. As regrettable as his language is, Uma has a point. So does IGA. Why would we let you escape this place, now that we have the head of the beast right there for us to cut it off? My hands were clammy. Blood was pulsing in my head. When adrenaline ran highest, though, the best way to stay calm was to amuse yourself. Jiraiya was a master at this. Kakashi hadn't been half bad either. And I had expected a question like this, and I had waited for a chance to say this cheesy line for ages. I lifted my chin and smiled. What makes you think you could stop me? I was burning their astounded faces into my memory, when laughter rang out in the back. It came in wheezy bursts, interrupted by a hacking cough. Let me through, Sonny! I heard from behind a stout fellow, who stepped aside to reveal an old lady, hunchbacked and trembling on her walking stick as she fought her way up to the front. Grandmother, Kiku said, her lips a perfect O shape of surprise. I thought you had gone to bed. Pesht, the old lady said with an arthritic wave of her hand, its skin blue-veined and blotted with liver spots. As if I could sleep with all of you shouting and growling like dogs in front of my porch. Now, what's this? A Konohanin? Came a long way, did you? She shuffled towards me, her eyes scrunched up behind thick, horn-rimmed glasses that gave her the appearance of an ancient beetle. After a while, the old lady said to Kiku, He's handsome. Let him in. Grandmother! I have to agree with Kiku-sama. Uma burst out. He's an enemy. He'll bring nothing but trouble. We ought to kill him. Why haven't you then? Something about him gives you pause, eh? At Uma's red face the old lady began to cackle. No worries there, scion of Uma. I understand, it's a thing of pride for you. But this is my home, and don't you forget it. Now get him inside, give him some sake, and tomorrow we'll hear what this Konohanin has to say to us. Up. It's cold out here, and I'll be damned if I freeze to death in front of my own house. The night had taken a strange turn. I sat on a pillow at a low table stretching an entire hall, my belly full of food and a cup of the best sake grass had to offer in front of me. A pipe was being reached around. The old lady was impervious to the awkwardness surrounding us. It took her all of 2 minutes to involve me and others in a lively discussion about the merits of some food over others, smoothly transitioning to stories about missions gone hilariously awry, and of those everyone had a fair few to share. The old bird was kooky, and at times had probably been at odds with Konoha, but she seemed a good person. Kika hadn't said a word since we sat down. She kept tracking my movements, though. The rest of the table was split. Some were relaxing into the evening, helped along by liquor, while others sat glaring and whispering among themselves. It didn't take a genius to figure out why. The boy next to me was no older than 11. What he was doing at this meeting I couldn't say, but they gave him sake, too, and I soon talked to him about the difference a well-sharpened kunai made in a fight, and how to manipulate it to more effect. "You flick it like this, see?" I said, demonstrating with a tablespoon. "It's easy enough. Swipe and deflect, flick, then stab." The boy looked on, fascinated. He took his own spoon out of his bowl and flicked it around. "So, like this? Give it more kick in your wrist. You want it to almost snap around." He tried it to, well, some effect. It was enough to make him grin, though. "This is great. Daichi won't see this coming. Next time we spar, I'll stomp him for sure." I snorted. Whoever Daichi was, he seemed to be the kid's Sasuke. "Once you got this down, get someone to show you how to use wires. You can do some mean stuff if you combine the two. It's perfect for tripping people up." He was all ears. In between staring at me, he absent-mindedly ate his soup. The next time he tried the flick, though, some was still left on his spoon. The rapid motion sent it hurling across the room, a single pea among it, and right into Uma's sake cup. I had never seen a human face grow red that fast. Uma's heavy jowls were shuddering, his whole body trembling, as the old lady began to laugh and the table followed suit. Even IGA, that long-necked guy, couldn't help the grin as he saw a pea bob around in Uma's cup. The sake, the heavy food, the pipe's voluminous clouds hovering around the ceiling, all of it patted my mind in cotton as the tiredness from the days before came crashing down on me. I couldn't fall asleep at the table, though. The old lady had already told me that a futon would be waiting for me, and that talking shop could wait until sunrise when everyone was clear-minded again. She had said this after recounting how, 50 years ago, she had danced with Gigi at a festival. The very next morning, having shared a bed only the night before, their missions crossed and they recognized each other. They continued their dance, then. This time with fire, iron, and blood. I was mighty impressed by that story, but still hoped my morning would hold better things in store. The pipe passed me by. I took a drag and coughed, to the amusement of the boy, who got it next and puffed on it like an expert. "If you want a really fresh feeling," he said, "blow it out through your nose. It feels great." I did coughed again because I never even got to the exhaling part intact, and handed the pipe over. Smoking wasn't for me, and I was sure Hinata would have a lot to say if I started now. "And it's all just 1 liter?" the boy asked a while later. "Why do you even have clans, then, if they're not free to do what they want?" I suppressed a yawn. "They are, for the most part. And they specialize in different areas that are only accessible to their family members. It would be weird not to call that a clan. But if one insults the other, they can't just, fight it out among the clans? They always have to go to your Hokage for permission. Isn't that a lot of work when a quick fight would solve things much easier?" "I'm sure there's plenty of fighting it out going on," I said with a grin, remembering some interesting duels I'd had with Kiba over the smallest things. "But for the big stuff, the Hokage will be there, and you'll come to an agreement. That's the whole point of a village. You do things together. We do things together too, you know. It's not like we're..." He was looking for the right word. "Savages here. We work in teams too." "You're exactly right, we do." Uma's baritone came from the other end of the table. "And that's just like Konoha, assuming we're savage and uncivilized just because we don't adopt their fancy system of one dictator ruling all. It's what they always do, looking down on us. It's always the same. All the damn time, they think they're so much better than we. You know it's true. I know it's true. Even that Konoha knows it's true. That's why he's skirting around the issue so much, isn't that right, you damn bastard?" The room had grown silent at his outburst. I wanted to reply at first, but then thought better of it. I wasn't here to start trouble. That's what I told them at the start. Even tired, I knew the best option was to remove myself from this situation before it escalated. I looked at the old lady. "You mind if I step out for a moment to get some fresh air?" "Go on, handsome," she said in that cackling tone of hers. "There's a barrel of water right next to the gate if you want to dunk your head in." "I'll go and find it," I said, my body protesting as I rose to my feet. I left the room as dignified as I could and splashed my face with water, chasing away the weariness. A temporary solution at best. The effect would wear off in 5 minutes, if not sooner. Stretching my legs might help, though. I wandered about in the garden, past animal statues and flowers, a stiff breeze ruffling my hair. Fireflies had taken to the edge of the tarn, and with the moon as tiny as it was, the stars shone bright and clear overhead as the wind made ripples on the water. At the edge of the tarn I said, "No need to hide. If you want to talk, I'm right here." Kiku appeared beside me. This close, her hair really was quite impressive with its loops and braids, all coiled up in patterns. "I was not hiding," she said, looking out at the tarn. I shrugged. "You weren't showing either. I'm surprised you came alone, to be honest. Would have expected the angry barrel man to come running after you the moment you set foot outside." What an insolent thing to say. While I apologize for his outburst, he is still the leader of Uma, and you should pay him that respect. "I'm not sure Konoha put that on him," she said, her voice like steel. "He was there to guard his father the last time our villages talked of peace and corroboration. And he was there half a year later when his father died in a skirmish between Konoha and Iiwa. A battle on his clan's territory. A battle that should have never happened, given the agreement that lay just 6 months in the past. You think him a fool for his anger? He has more right to it than anyone else at that table." She clicked her tongue. "Besides, I'm not so weak as to need help watching you." "Never said you were," I returned, though my annoyance at Uma's words dimmed a fair bit after I learned of his past with Konoha. We were silent for a while, observing the fireflies. Then she said, "If you are tired, you can lie down. Until grandmother has heard your side tomorrow, no one will harm you. She's a nice lady, your grandma. You think she'll go for a ceasefire?" Kika's cool eyes settled on me. I said, "Can't hurt to ask. But I'm hopeful she hasn't danced with the Chuchikage, too. That would complicate things." More silence. Her lips had twitched, though, before she went back to indifference. Then she said, "Were you involved in killing Orochimaru-sama?" "Right. There was that." I glanced at her. "Did you like him?" She gave me a hard stare. "Everyone at that table did." "Hard to imagine. Your grandma, too?" I took her hesitation as all the information I needed. No wonder I liked the old lady. As I said, really nice woman, your grandma. Got a good head on her shoulders and knows a snake when she sees one. I was making no friends, but for them to cherish Orochimaru to such a degree was strange beyond belief. "I'm not here to make enemies out of you," I went on. "But you know the state the world's in. Konoha can't just hand over grass to Iwa, who will take it if given the chance." What a strange thing to say. How about handing the country to those it belongs to? Is that such a foreign concept to Konoha? I made a dissatisfied noise in the back of my throat. "Iwa would come for you. You have no way to resist them." Kiku's eyes blazed, a sheen to them from the fireflies nearby. "We are resisting right now, Uzumaki Naruto. You're here to negotiate precisely because we have not put down our weapons." "I'm here because I prefer talking to seeing blood," I said. "You know as well as I do what would happen if we up and left. Iwa would spread like a bad smell in your country, that's what. And they'd smoke out every rebel who's got the guts to go against them. I'm sure you've heard what they're doing over in Waterfall. Is there resistance? You bet. But it doesn't do a lick for them, does it? Iwa is still running roughshod over their country." I stuffed my hands in my pockets and turned to the tarn, blinking heavily. The effect of the cold water was wearing thin already. I had let myself go there. "All I want is for us to get along well enough to stay out of each other's way," I said. "At least until we've pushed Iwa back to their country. In return, and with your help, I'll try to make life for the clans as easy as possible while this is going on. I think that'd benefit everyone. Most of all, it benefits you and Konoha," Kika said. She crossed her arms. "The very people that assassinated Orochimaru-sama." I rubbed aggressively at my eyes. "Always with that damn snake. Whatever Orochimaru was to you, he was a criminal and traitor to Konoha. I wasn't the one to end him, but I would have lost no sleep doing it." Diplomacy 101. Maybe I should have brought Shikamaru with me after all. Her expression hardened, and we didn't speak at all until we rejoined the others. I stayed with them in the hall for a while longer, then went to catch some sleep. Kiku, who showed me to my room, was gracious enough to leave me with a parting shot. Turns out that, lovely as she was, the old lady had retired some time ago to these mountains, handing all matters of clan leadership over to her granddaughter, who now sat at the very top of the loose clan hierarchy in grass. It would be Kiku who presided over the talks tomorrow morning. At any other time this would have kept me awake the whole night. But by then I had gone days with rarely any shut-eye. I was emotionally and physically drained, and felt it to my bones. I was in enemy territory, for all I knew surrounded by people who hated my guts, and I was about to fall asleep like a damn stone. If Kakashi were still alive, or Shikamaru could see me right now, they'd get aneurysms, the two of them. I startled awake to a drawn-out wail that went through my navel like an arrow. Things were breaking apart. The wailing came in a woman's pitch, punctuated by screams. The acrid smell of smoke was everywhere around me. I threw off the covers, picked up my vest, and checked for my weapons. Everything was in order. Face set, I pushed the paper door aside, stepping out into the cloistered hallway that ran around the inner gardens. A huge chunk of earth had reduced the courtyard to rubble, sticking out of the central fountain like a spear through a man's body. It was early morning. A red-violet sun was rising and the residue of chakra lay thick in the air. An explosion rocked the floor, more boomed farther away. I sent clones to find out what was going on, before moving myself, minding my step. When I reached another hallway, the wind shifted course in an instant. I wheeled around, a kunai spinning into my grip. Sparks flew. A shinobi with a bulbous nose retreated, his sword split in half from the wind racing along the edge of my steel. His eyes bulged when the wind spiraled forward from the tip of my kunai, piercing his throat. I crouched next to him. His Hittite showed the leaf of Konoha. He wasn't one of my men, though. Had Danzo sent another team? How could he have even known about this meeting? I traced back the pipeline of information but found no leak. Izuna was unlikely, too. Sakura had grown to be uncanny in her perception of character. It was damn hard to get anything past her, let alone spending time with her for years and not being found out. And anyway, the information couldn't have traveled to Konoha within a day. Which left only one other option. Goddamn Iwa was messing things up again. I ripped the hide aid away from the guy's arm, pocketing it, and continued my way through the compound, towards the exit. The screaming got louder as I came out to the huge garden that led to the tarn. Trees and bushes were burning. The animal statues had crumbled in places, torn apart or torched to a black mass. High-level fire techniques. They weren't holding back, trying to implicate Konoha. One by one my clones popped themselves, giving me a better red. To the north of the compound, the fighting was the fiercest. I grimaced when I got the information that the old lady had found her end as a human torch. Steel clashed close to me, and I crept behind the rubble of a pair of statues. The boy I'd been talking to just hours ago was duking it out with a far bigger man, whose Konoha Hittite gleamed around his forehead. The kid put up a desperate fight, using the trick I had told him of proficiently enough to make me think he had trained it all night in his room after the party ended. The imposter brushed him aside with a laugh, though. Strength and experience was worth more than a few tricks with a knife. I came barreling out of my hiding place, but the man had already buried his kunai held deep in the boy's thigh and kicked his legs away. While the kid cried out and fell backwards to the floor, I rammed my knuckles hard enough into the man's stomach to crater his intestines. He slid off my fist with a moan. He'd be dead in half a minute. I crouched next to the boy. "Outta there, that was a good fight, man. Can you stand up?" His eyes darted around like a chased hare. I said, "Focus. Can you hear me? Can you stand?" He nodded slowly. "Good," I said. "Then let's get you upright." I took him by his shoulder and heaved him up. He cringed away from the pain but held fast, and then we were standing. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, voice trembling like a wood shack during an earthquake. "They're not mine." False flag. "You know any healing?" "No," he said, lowering his eyes. "I never thought I'd get hurt enough to have to use it?" "Same here. Don't worry. You know anyone who can, though? If I were you, I wouldn't pull out that kunai until you got to someone who can stop the bleeding. It's in a bad spot." He was leaning heavily on me, breathing hard. "Kikusama she's the only one, I think. The only one who can do that." He squeezed his eyes shut. "The only one who can heal." He pressed out. "Better than nothing," I said. "Okay, listen to me. 2 minutes ago she was east of here, close to the tarn. She should still be nearby. Go there, get it healed. Take the bushes and statues as cover. You're strong, kid. Think you can make it that far on your own? I'll help the others in the meanwhile." He nodded, and I let go of him. When he took his first tentative steps, I said, "That's good. One after the other. Just like that. Go find her. She'll patch you up." I was turning north, when the kid let out a stifled cry. He had fallen forward, driving the kunai deeper into his flesh, and now lay prone on the ground, writhing around like a buck shot with an arrow. Easy pickings for even the dumbest and weakest IWA need to stumble over him. When I lifted him into my arms, he had already fallen unconscious. My hands became slick with the blood seeping through his pants. Damn it all. In this chaos of allegiances, I wasn't sure I'd trust a clone with anything, let alone carrying that boy. I had to get the kid to Kiku first, and then support the others. One misstep and my chances went to nil. I snuck with him through the garden, toward the tarn. The place was a ruin now. Uma roared in the distance. A gout of flame shot high into the morning sky, vanishing in the red of the sun. I found Lady Kiku north of the tarn. Her nightdress was torn, half of her ear cut off. She had a wild, hunted look in her eyes. A dozen shinobi lay around her, and only 2 of them I recognized as other clan leaders. The rest were imposters. "You!" she hissed, crouching low and ready to pounce. "Don't," I said. "He's injured." I lifted the boy in my hands. "They're trying to pin this on Konoha." The ferocious gleam in her eyes didn't subside. I laid down the boy in front of her. "He lost a lot of blood. Get to it if you don't want him to die here. There's been enough death already." "A false flag?" she said, sinking to her knees beside the boy, her hands glowing green. She was healing him without looking away from me. "Yeah. None of them are mine," I said. When I tapped the corpse next to me with a foot, it let out a moan. I started. "They're not dead." "They will be," she said. "The poison is taking a moment. They're all paralyzed." I said, "Whatever you say." When a rustle of clothes came from behind Kiku. I reached forward to pull her away, but a knife the length of my forearm already stuck out between her breasts. As it carved upwards toward her throat, she stabbed a kunai behind her with lightning speed, right into the ear of her assailant. She looked at me. Then she fell backwards on the shinobi who had stabbed her, and together they slumped sideways, sliding to the ground in a grotesque tangle. I heard Uma before I saw him. I leaped back on instinct, right into the water bullet Iga was shooting at me. Before it hit me, I substituted myself with some of the rubble, landing a few feet away from them. Their eyes were bugging out like unscrewed light bulbs, and their snarls were full of teeth and bloody foam like rabid dogs. They were screaming for vengeance. There was no talking to them. Not anymore. I ran. I called clones here and there to make my escape easier, but all I wanted was to get away from this place. They pursued me a fair distance, knowing the mountains better than I did by far. Clambering over the rocks, I found the path I had taken the night before, and halfway down I was met with a sight for sore eyes. To the backdrop of that horrific red sunrise, Shikamaru, Subaru, and a group of 10 shinobi, having disobeyed a direct order, were hiking the trail leading up the mountain. My fist was shaking on the table inside my tent. I tried to keep it still, but it didn't work, so I necked a cup of sake and closed my eyes instead. Iwa had gotten me good. As things stood, I wouldn't be surprised if the clans focused their attention exclusively on us now. I knew I would. I had allowed myself some hope when I got the kid to Kiku and found her alive and well. I had thought, in that mercenary way which became second nature to every shinobi, that I couldn't just save the boy but could also better make my case, now that Iwa had played into my hand. A wise shinobi would have ducked out and cut his losses, but even though my chances had been minimal, I'd seen a way to clear up this mess if I helped enough people. Then Kiku had died, quicker than blowing out a candle. She'd looked capable. How come the poison hadn't affected the guy closest to her? I had racked my brain over that one all the way down Mount Hibiko. He was resistant to it, at least partially, Shikamaru said, once I had told him the details and he took a seat. He might have been the one to poison our scouts, to make it look like the clans did it. Immunizing themselves is an old habit of shinobi dealing with poisons. It's impossible to safeguard against everything, but his training could have had him avoid the worst of it. I looked up from my empty cup. They're not messing around this time. Might be different leadership than in Fong. I grunted. I don't want them to be clever. Who does? We've got to deal with it anyway. We can't afford to be slow if Iwa has already advanced this far into the country. I tipped back another cup, then stood. I had a feeling the memories of Kiku, the kid, and the old lady would follow me for a while. But Shikamaru was right. We had to act fast, or things would spiral even further out of control. I had no time to wallow. But first I had to do something else. Shikamaru was studying a map, humming soundlessly under his breath as his eyes rove around the rivers and ravines, looping past villages and towns, mountains and woods. I had done him a bad turn. He was one of my oldest friends, and I had gotten in a real cheap shot when we were at each other's throats a few days ago. I still didn't know what Hinata had been thinking, asking my officers to be so overprotective, but I had gone about my anger in a bad way. And even though Chia was only a few weeks old, I wouldn't want her to think of me as the kind of man who rams a spike in a friend's heart. All of my role models had been honorable to a fault. They patched things up when stuff went wrong. So would I. Listen, Shikamaru, about that thing. He turned. MHH? I'm sorry for how things went between us. I shouldn't have involved Ino, that was crossing a line. I just want all of us to make it out of here alive. I hesitated, then said, I guess I tend to get a bit stubborn in how I go about things, is what I'm saying. Shikamaru searched my face. Then he gave me a crooked grin. A bit? I've seen trees who listen better. He let slip a chuckle at my grimace. Forget about it. And for what it's worth, I'm sorry too. I shouldn't have pulled your family into the argument either. We exchanged a glance of uncertainty, both looking for whether things were all right now, before stepping at the same time toward the map. Have you found an angle? I asked. Maybe, he said. Iwa reacted far quicker than expected. Their activity in grass has exploded in the past week. I don't just mean the false flags either. Those maneuvers muddy the waters, but what I'm concerned about is this. He pointed at a dot in the middle of grass. This is Kumi Castle, he said. The former home of the Kumi clan. It's a massive structure, the only stronghold of its kind in grass. Back when the clan was prominent, it controlled many of the surrounding cities and villages, though the castle is pretty much rubble now. Rubble with a good position, though, I murmured. You think Iwa will take it now? The way there is still one hell of a ride through clan territory. It'd be a ballsy move for them not to cover their bases first and go full throttle towards the middle. The Iwanin we've met in grass haven't struck me as cowards so far. It's what I'd do in their place, keep the enemy occupied and move into a position of strength in the meanwhile. Though we might not be too late yet. I don't think they expected you to be at the clan meeting and learn about their interference. If you construct the timeline from their perspective, they're probably waiting for the clans to shift their attention to us in anger, before setting out to Kumi Castle themselves. That can't be done in a day. If we're fast, we might still have a chance then. How about it, want to take a gander at that place? He raised his brow. You sound oddly confident all of a sudden. We need a win, and this will be it. Besides, I always wanted to own a castle. His snort was comforting. In that case, I'll leave you to your daydreams, he said, and prepare the troops for the attack. At the flap to my tent he stopped. Before I forget, there's a scroll for you from Konoha. I put it on your desk. I gave him a nod and my thanks. During wartime, the post delivery system was sporadic at best, non-existent at worst. I could send official information with one of my shinobi, but private matters were left to the postaline that would swing by every now and then. It was a hard duty. By necessity, they were the best at stealth and concealment, and often also the fastest Konoha had to offer. Kakashi had told me that sometimes ANBU on their mandated leave would take up missions of this kind under a false name, to keep themselves sharp while not having to fight. The problem was that, once a postaline came by, it could take months until they made another appearance. I hadn't finished my letter to Hinata, and the postaline was gone now anyway. I didn't know what was worse, that she might wait for a letter and not get one, or that she might not even expect one from me at all. Her letter was sealed with red wax, the stamp in the shape of a spiral. I broke the seal and unrolled the scroll a little. Hinata's handwriting was beautiful, a calligraphy more art than a way to say things. For a while I looked at it without trying to understand what it meant, before I began to read in earnest. How was I holding up? How was my command? Did I get enough sleep? Was I injured in any way? Hinata's letters usually started off with questions like those, but this time there was an urgency to them that made me feel even worse for not having sent her anything. I bit my lip and kept reading. Jiraiya-sama has come by recently with a gift. He brought Chie a little plush toad. You would have loved the sight, Naruto. They are inseparable. Of course Tsunade-sama wouldn't let him have his victory, and now Chie also has a matching slug. I asked the photographer to come over and take a picture. They didn't allow me to send it, since pictures aren't allowed for security reasons. I will show you once you get back. We are doing well though. Contrary to what I was told by my father about babies, Chie is a very well-mannered girl. It surprises him a great deal. He said that I was quite rebellious, saying nothing of Hanabi. I cannot bring myself to believe him fully though. I remember Hanabi as a newborn, and she was the most well-behaved and refined baby I had ever seen. As is Chie. There is other news. A few days ago, Shizune called me into the hospital. I will not bore you with the details, but a patient with a chakra-related issue needed a form of experimental treatment. It had to be provided while tracking the progress inside the chakra coils and adjusting the process continually. Even Sakura had trouble with it, but I finally managed to cure the patient. I was really happy that I was able to heal her. Shizune told me that she would call me in more often now, to see where else the Byakugan can provide an advantage. It is very exciting, and some days I wonder if I can do it all. But Shizune is optimistic, so I am too. The letter stopped shortly after, even though there was still some scroll to go. I unfurled the rest of it. On the empty space left over, instead of Hinata's signature, I found 2 handprints in orange, one tiny, the other larger. Smiling, I rubbed at my eyes with the ball of my palm. I read the letter a second and third time, picturing Chia with her toys, and Hinata in the hospital. Then I pushed a bunch of paper around on the table until I found a wooden box with a spiral engraved on its lid. Hayashi's gift had a blood seal that would destroy the box and its contents should it be overwhelmed by outside forces. It was quite small, though, because this kind of craftsmanship cost a fortune. I bit my thumb, opened the box, and dumped out the few missives I had gotten from Danzo and Shikaku. Then I tied a piece of twine around Hinata's letter, before putting it inside. I gave the missives a cursory glance, selected the most important ones, and put those in also, before resealing the box. I could have stared at that letter for ages, memorizing every word, imagining every scene in detail again and again, but duty was calling once more and I wouldn't let Shikamaru do all the preparation himself. Yet even as I readied myself to take on Kumi Castle, I kept picturing the letter, only this time it had 3 handprints instead of 2, and I wondered, was this really worth it? Chapter 6. It took us less than 3 days to reach the castle, days in which the genjutsu experts among my troops kept us hidden. They spun layers of concealment that made it seem as if only air was passing by. The smells of pine, birch and damp soil spread from their techniques to cover our odor, and a net of sounds extended from their fingers that made the animal kingdom seem come alive. Still, our steps were tense. We had left the safer outskirts of the country behind. Here, clan territory stretched in every direction. In the gray hours before dawn, Kumi Castle lay before us, a behemoth as large as a city. The forest around it had been cut for 1.5 miles in every direction. The corpse of a village snuggled against the western entrance we were facing. The houses lacked roofs save for charred beams. In the middle of this former pyre, though still overshadowed by the castle's gate, was a bell tower made of stone that stood crooked and windswept, half of its topmost part undone. Its rusted bells sat askew against the wall, and used for what seemed centuries. Shikamaru and I were crouching on a branch, our men some 200 yards below us. "Do you think that's from the last war, or even from before that?" I asked. "I couldn't say," Shikamaru told me. "I'm more curious about why Orochimaru made his hideout so close to Konoha when he had this bastion in his backyard. Maybe he didn't want to remind the clans of bad history? If we torched that place during the war, just walking to an audience would have put you in a bad mood. It is such a central position, though. To give it up is odd. I guess." Kumi Castle and the area it controlled lay wedged between the familiar names of Uma and Iga. One to the east of it, and one to the west. "We'll have a bitch of a time pacifying the clans around us. It's either that or letting Iwa have it. The clans will bother us no matter what we do." "True enough," I said, rising from my crouch. "Let's get to it. I don't like staring at it for much longer." I stepped off the branch, landing in front of our troops. A few manned the headquarters, but the majority of our forces stood lined up in front of me. Subaru, who had sat on a boulder away from the rank and file, came to me, his eyes bulging. "Anything?" I asked. "Nothing, sir. The castle appears empty." "And behind the castle?" "I can't say, sir. It's too far from my Byakugan." I nodded. It would take a Hyuga of Neiji's or Hayashi's caliber to see any farther than that. He resumed his place within the ranks, and I took up position in front of the lines, panning my gaze across all the faces staring at me. I kept a tight grip on my face. I couldn't afford a nervous smile. If any of them saw me jittery, their morale would be shot. "This is it, folks. The big castle. If we get this, we get grass. If we get grass, we get to push Iwa back into their rocky desert." Some rookies glanced around for cues on how to behave. The rest looked on, grim and fierce. "There are 4 entrances to the place, north, south, east, west. 2 of them are the big ones, east and west. Those are the ones we'll be taking. Shikamaru already handed out your team assignments. Those with him will take the eastern gate. The rest goes with me to the western one. Once we're inside, scour the place top to bottom, then we'll meet up in the middle. Any questions?" In the minute of our silence, the first birds awakened to the day. I said, "Good. Then let's get to it." They thumped their fists on their vests. "Yes, sir." I leaned over to Shikamaru. "I'll go first. The moment you see us move out, start. Good luck." "You too." We separated into our respective halves, and I kept my eyes glued to the castle. The operation would begin once the first ray of sunshine broke through the gloom of pre-dawn. When the gray sky was pierced by light, I fell into an easy jog. Moving under the illusions that hit us was like wading with your head underwater. From behind sounded the rustling of clothes and jingling of loose equipment. I stepped up my pace. My strides became longer, quicker, more forceful. As I flew across the plain, my shinobi took it up a notch as well. Our breathing unified, became one in nervous excitement. Then all of us were running, I the tip of the spear. The distance shrunk. When the genjutsu couldn't contain us anymore, it distorted, then tore like wet paper over our heads, revealing us to the world. Halfway to the castle, we were out in the open, and my heart beat hard and fast. The earth underground was compact dirt. Dust puffed up on each step. I strained my senses to extend as far as possible. A boulder, a gout of flame, anything at all, and I'd be able to react. Let them come, I thought. Let them damn well come. I'd break them apart. We pulled level with the walls, passing through the ruined village. When we reached the gate, no one attacked us either. The run had been quick, but I was short of breath anyway, with all those people behind me. Are we good? I asked Subaru. His Byakugan stared off into the distance. Nothing for 2 miles, sir. When he turned east, though, he stiffened. There is. Nara-san is under attack, sir. I cannot see everything, but his men appear to be fighting. So we hadn't been fast enough after all. Can you make out more? I'm sorry, but it's right at the edge of my vision. I would have to get closer. Then we'll do that. Listen, I said to my men. Shikamaru has come under attack. Forget scouring the place for now. We're going to move through the castle, flank Iwa, and give them a piece of our mind. I was raising my fist to the sky when the ground gave a low, piteous moan, followed by a deep-set rumbling, as if Gamabunta had tripped miles away and the aftershock of his fall was only now reaching us. The ground under our feet started trembling. I turned sharply. Subaru! He was staring at his feet, his eyes pinched in an effort to see farther into the earth. It was one of the few weaknesses the Byakugan had. Its vision into the ground was only a fraction of a Hyuga's normal visual distance. The moment his eyes blew wide open, I screamed. Scatter! The earth exploded upward. Dirt and debris was raining down on us as the ground ruptured, driven apart like flesh by steel. I landed outside of this blood and earth geyser, 2 rookies on my shoulders. A veteran kunoichi touched down next to me with 2 more on her back. The same repeated itself all over, as I heard the screams of people I had been talking to the past month. At the sight of the dust covering the whole village, a blackness crowded my chest, tying me to the ground. Small shards of wood poured from the sky, sticking to my vest, the bigger ones bouncing off. Subaru was talking to me. Yiwa, ambush. At those words, the black inside me thinned out, became hot red, and I snapped out of my daze. A growl pushed past my lips as I darted into the billowing dust. They thought they had the advantage with this? That we were easy pickings because none of us could see in this dust storm? I bared my teeth in a snarl and pressed my hands together. A whirl of chakra cut a circle of clarity around me. I blasted enough chakra through my pathways to keep the windmills of Fire Country spinning for centuries. The circle expanded, pressing dust and dirt away. Wind was howling in my ears. I slammed my hands onto the ground, and with this last gesture sent wind and earth spinning up and away. I rose to my feet in a field of debris, surrounded by IWA on 3 sides. At my feet lay a boy of 17 with barely some fuzz to his face. Only a week ago he told me he sent all his money to his civilian grandmother in Konoha. Now sharp rocks the length of my arm protruded from his bloody back. When the first IWA came at me, I pushed past his defense in 2 punches, grabbed his head, and smashed it on my knee. The second and third IWA met a similar, ruthless fate. Then they put me in a 6-man pincer. Before they got anywhere, 2 of them sank to the ground like sacks of meat. Subaru had cut them down with precise strikes. The rest of my troops had awakened to the fight. The dizzying cacophony of war set in around me. I resisted the temptation to fall into that red pit. It was heavy and mindless. I couldn't afford that anymore if I wanted my people to make it out of this alive. The Chunin at my feet had been the first death under my command. I'd damn well make it the last one. I need to get a better look at things, I said to Subaru as I pushed through the fighting toward the bell tower, calling up clones and sending them to help where they could. The more I called, the weaker they got. They didn't have to be strong, though. If they provided even half a second of distraction, they would be useful. Subaru and I scaled the wall of the tower, up to the top where the bells sat askew. Rubble and bodies littered the area before the western gate. Like flashing lightning, shinobi met in an endless clash of steel. The battle had stretched away from the gate, into the forest, where 2 fireballs arced over the treetops and a wall of earth sprung up in answer half a mile north of them. The hole the IWA had come through spanned the entirety of the village's plaza. Had it been a team effort? Or a single technique, worked by one shinobi? If the latter, we were in deep trouble. The chaos down below made it hard to answer any of my questions. Do you see anyone down there that could be responsible for the whole? I don't think so, sir, Subaru said, glaring into the madness. They're matching us in number and strength, but there is no one that. He trailed off, and I asked, What is it? There's someone approaching from the north, sir, and fast. His chakra reserves are enormous. Subaru took a step back. Sir, he's familiar. He's. I tuned out Subaru, my eyes zeroing in on the forest north of Kumi Castle. I sensed him as well now, and the hairs on my neck stood straight like soldiers, saluting his entrance. The miasma that was Rashi's chakra proved hard to forget. How he had tricked me with that sealed scroll still left a sour taste in my mouth. Had it been only us, I would have leapt down the tower already, locking horns with him to find out who was the better shinobi now that I had no debilitating injuries. But it wasn't just us. I had so many people to protect in this battle, I barely knew where to start. The thought of even more deaths under my command was a dark spot in my mind. I need an update on Shikamaru's situation, I told Subaru. Get to a position where you have better vision, then report back to me. I'll hold off Rashi in the meanwhile. Then I stepped off the tower, letting gravity pull me down. It was time for an entrance Uzumaki style. Old Thousand Face still had a few cards to play. Hundreds of clones popped up around me mid-flight, crowding the air with green jonin vests and blonde hair. The first row and I landed in a crouch that equaled the explosions around us in thunder. We blasted off, cratering the ground in our wake. The second line of clones followed, then the third and fourth. Soon the bell tower was a waterfall, hundreds of me flooding the village in front of the castle, as if a broken dam had given in at last. I split away from the wave, rushing to meet Rashi as long as he was still away from the main battle. That and the clones were all I could do to help my shinobi. I thought about sending some to Shikamaru. At that distance, though, they would be useless idiots and more danger than help. Shikamaru was the smartest person I knew, though. He had to be fine. Rashi greeted me with a snarl. You? I growled. Yeah, me. Then we leapt at each other. The world around me was a crater. The morning sun had given way to rain, turning it into a muddy pit. Wet dirt, grass and blood specked my face, hair, arms and legs, and everything else in between. Rashi's beard was crusted brown. A coat of filth ringed his eyes. He vanished from my sight. At the squeak of muddy boots, I turned, my arm encased in wind. I sliced the boulder coming at me apart, and met Rashi midair with a kick that sent wind and mud tearing at him. He got some more of it in his eyes and hollered a curse. Turning on my axis, I pushed myself forward with a blast of wind, speeding up and spinning. This time my foot connected. There was a short struggle as we fell down, then the force of the kick overwhelmed him. I torpedoed him towards the ground, where he bounced before sliding hard through the mud. As I was about to press the attack, the gaping maw of an earth dragon rose from the ground. A clone pulled me out of the collision course, but Rashi had anticipated the dodge. A muddy cannonball hit me square in the stomach. My clones exploded into smoke, while I slammed into the ground at the other end of the crater. My world spun. A barrage of mud projectiles kept me pinned to the ground. I lifted my arms to shield myself. When I blinked, I had a moment of mental displacement as the memory of a dying clone distracted me. I saw myself standing next to a kunoichi from Konoha who had lost her footing in the blood-slick grass. She was young and puking, sitting next to another Konohanin whose giant stomach wound was half closed on one side while the other was leaking guts. I told her to get up. She stared at me, no understanding in her eyes. It was Izuna, dark hair tied back in the fashion Sakura had taught her for combat. Some of it was sticking to the snot and sweat on her face. Then the clone took a brace of shuriken to the back of my head. Another blink, and Rashi was in front of me, fist cocked back. I took the hit, which drove me deeper into the crater, then screamed at him with enough wind and fury to blast him off me. Izuna's face came up in my mind again and again, and I kept screaming even when the wind was already gone. I dashed out of the muddy indention I had left in the crater and hurled myself forward. Sir! When Subaru landed behind me, the ticker in my chest went up like an exploding tag. I had forgotten that I sent him to gather information. This crater was no place for an ordinary shinobi. I called up another wave of clones. Half of them went to support my troops. The other half leapt into suicide against Rashi. Report, I bid out. When I stopped moving, my sides hurt. It's the clans, Subaru told me, his eyes flickering over my shoulder where Rashi was decimating my clones. I got no memories from them. My own death was a common enough occurrence that it struck me either as strange nor as impactful. Nara-san is breaking under the attack. They have him surrounded with Iwa and are slowly gaining ground. He might be able to hold for a few more minutes, but... Losses? I asked, half expecting Subaru to shake his head. I had faith. Despite fighting against superior numbers, Shikamaru would have strategized a way to keep them alive. I have no concrete numbers, but it seems like half is already gone. My knees turned to water. Half? The black mass writhing inside me was growing, pushing everything else away. This time there would be no anger to blast it to smithereens. It would keep hollowing me out. Sir! Subaru's panicked cry made me look up. Rashi was done with my clones. He looked more annoyed than frustrated. And why would he be anything else? He was playing a game for time, and he was winning. Call the retreat, I said to Subaru. My voice sounded dead to my ears, and dulled, as if coming from far away. We're leaving for Shikamaru's side. Tell the men to get there quick. Rashi raised his eyebrow. He had heard my order. Going so soon, Uzumaki? I had nobody come back for him. I leapt out of the crater, and from there took off alongside the wall of Kumi Castle, Subaru and the rest of my shinobi falling in beside me. Rashi only made a token effort at following us. His objective was the castle, and he had reached that without a problem. Eyes downcast we ran east, the rain lashing our faces while the cheers of Iwa were rising behind us. The city we paused in for the evening during our retreat was a ruin hours south of Kumi Castle. In every war it had been reduced to rubble. Without fail, the people had built it up again, only for the cycle to repeat itself. Until a little more than a decade ago. The families who had been living here were either scattered throughout nearby villages or migrated farther west into the bigger cities near the border to Rain Country. I was sitting on the top of a tower. It was overgrown with moss and overlooked most of the woods. The rain had stopped a while ago, and the afternoon sun made the wet leaves shine like tear-stricken faces. I lifted a jug of sake to my lips and took a draught, looking out at the world, trying but unable to forget. My mind had been playing through my clone's memories for a while now. It was a theater that gave shape to the horror lodged in my gut, and filled out the colors for me as I caught up to what I had heard and seen but not quite understood. I had known brutality before. Having seen it from 1,000 angles, I had become immune to my own death. That of other people? Not so much. The more revolted and struck my clones had been, the more I was. I forgot a lot, but the really ugly memories stuck around. Before today, though, every time I had tried to protect someone, it had worked. Now I saw Izuna again and again. She was puking into the grass, looking lost, her face smeared with blood and dirt. After my clone had died, she did too, and she was one of dozens that I saw firsthand. Overall, we had lost 1/3 of our troops, most of that on Shikamaru's side. He had killed Iga and Uma himself, but the clans had been aided by more Iwa, dwindling his numbers fast. Which meant the clans were now reduced, and so were we. I wished I could say that if my clones were stronger over long distances, we wouldn't have lost so many. But that was a lie. I didn't wish for it. How many more of those memories could I take? Whoever had put that technique on the Forbidden Scroll was a smart person. My money was on Gigi. Dangling my feet from the tower, I leaned back and squeezed my eyes shut. Another memory was coming up. I tried drinking it away, but my hand shook and some of the sake spilled, dribbling down my lips. My hand scrambled across my chest until it found the swirl pendant. I gripped it hard, as if it was the last solid thing on earth. I thought of Chia and the evening on my father's stony nose, when all the lights had come alive and left Konoha a stunning, shimmering place within the dark. It didn't last. I saw Izuna again. I thought she had Hinata's face for a moment, but then it was her old one, full of blood. I let loose a laugh, a growl, I didn't know what it was. The next moment I heard something shatter next to me, and my eyes shot open. My hand was red. Shards lay scattered around my arm, and I held a few more in my clenched fist, the bottle gone. I stayed like this for hours, until the sun gave way to rain again and washed away the blood. Raindrops battered away at me. I didn't care. It had taken almost a day, but it was becoming easier to focus. I had my mind on a single memory. I sunk into it, tried to live it from every perspective. The rain helped. It made it easier to recall how Hinata's steps had whispered across the water, the moon shining on her wet hair, the rushing water from the waterfall concealing my steps as I watched her dance. I hadn't known people could move with so much grace. It had taken me years afterwards to admit it, but I was sure that was the moment when I first fell in love with her. Steps came up behind me, splashing. You should come inside. It'll be a cold wind tonight. If you stay up here, you'll freeze to death. The memory of Hinata vanished like a clone. Shikamaru stood above me in combat slacks, holding up his torn vest as a shield against the rain. I said, "Grass is done for, Shikamaru. The castle is Iwa's and our troops are almost halved. We've got nothing left to do here. It's all gone to shit." "Maybe. Maybe not. There might be some options left. We can talk about that inside, though. I wouldn't let a dog sleep outside in this weather, let alone a friend." Rain was leaking through the holes in his vest, onto his face. "It would take more men than we have to get a grip on grass. We can't. There's always some way to go forward." "Do you think so?" "It can't hurt to think so." He paused, then added, "This is the first time I see you like this. Get a grip, Naruto. There's always a way." I looked back at the sky pouring down on us. "This place is done for," he murmured under his breath. I wouldn't be surprised if it was his favorite word. "Get up now, or I'll have my shadows drag you inside in front of everyone else. I'm your commanding officer." All I wanted was for him to leave me alone with the one good memory I had made out among the 100 horrible ones. He narrowed his beetle-like eyes at me. There was a tortured look to them that was gone a moment later. "Do you think I care?" he said quietly. "I lost dozens today, some of whom I've known for years. I can stomach your reprimand. Now act like a commanding officer and get up. I've had it with this day. You're not about to make it any worse." He reached me his arm, and after a moment's hesitation I took it, letting him pull me to my feet. I was wet and dirty, my sandals squeaking and splashing as we walked inside the tower and down the spiral stairs. Torches lit the path. They were buoys of light in a sea of darkness. Not many, but enough to point the way. Shikamaru stopped under one of the torches as we were halfway down the tower. "You don't want them to see you like this. Your morale is their morale. If one goes under, the other follows." He was right in that I made a sorry sight. Given our current situation, I wasn't sure what exactly morale would get us, but prettying up took little enough effort. I enveloped myself in a cocoon of wind, setting the torch and its shadow seesawing. Once I was dry, we went down to the main hall adjacent to the tower. It was a solid building of stone with a room at the back that held a table and a rickety bed. The smell of barley gruel filled the hall. In one corner, anyone who had a passing knowledge of the healing arts was treating the wounded. I avoided looking there. I'd see Izuna in every one of them. The other shinobi were eating or warming up around fires, talking in hushed conversation. They quieted down when we crossed the hall. "Strong now," Shikamaru said under his breath. "Don't let them see weakness." I wasn't keen on the charade but still squared my shoulders, firmed my steps, and strode toward the room at the end of the hall. A kunoichi caught my eye. She sat near the fire, holding a bowl of gruel. I nodded at her. What little fire was left in me, I put into that nod. I did the same to every other shinobi crossing eyes with me. When at last Shikamaru closed the door behind me, I sank into a chair. It had been an exhausting walk. "That wasn't too bad," Shikamaru said, taking the seat on the opposite side of the table. He soundproofed the room with a minor illusion. "Some kind of speech would have been good, but we can give one tomorrow once we've come up with a plan." "What makes you so sure that we'll have a plan by then?" He leaned back in the chair. "Necessity." The only necessity I saw right then was getting more sake. I was an idiot for having crushed that bottle, and I told Shikamaru as much. He pulled out a cigarette and lit it with a stroke of his fingernail. He blew out smoke. "I don't think you're an idiot." I put my chin in my palm and studied him. He looked miserable, and yet he bore himself with a sense of confidence that amazed me. With all that death today, was he feeling the same as me and just hit it better? Maybe it was because he knew he could think his way out of every situation. If only I were as smart as him right now, I could have used some of that confidence. "Man," I said with a tired smile, "if I were a girl I'd be all over you. No wonder Ino's fallen for you. Temari too, now that I think of it. Anyone else? What about Sakura?" Talking about inconsequential things felt good. Before I could continue, Shikamaru interrupted me. "Are you still drunk?" The tip of his cigarette glowed red. He shook his head. "Stop skirting reality, Naruto. We've got problems to deal with." His words struck me silent. I stared over his shoulder at the wall. I didn't think about anything in particular, but when he let his cigarette fall to the floor, putting it out with his foot, I said, "What did you mean with necessity?" He took out another cigarette and lit that too. "We're here to stay, is what I mean. Danzo won't recall us. For better or worse, grass has become our burden to bear, and we have to make the best of it. That doesn't give us any kind of plan, though. It doesn't right now. But we might have one by tomorrow if we think things through. It's not like we have anything else to do." So we did. The night dragged on. Moonshine filtered in through the barred window. One thing was clear: without more troops, we held no candle in grass. As we were going through the options, I wondered how Shino was doing and if he had met the same kind of trouble. In the end, Shikamaru convinced me to swallow my pride and request reinforcements from Danzo, even though he told us that there wouldn't be any. It was one of the few things we could do. It would hurt my chances of becoming Hokage, but even as I thought that, I knew it to be a selfish thought and abandoned it. The bare bones of a plan laid out, Shikamaru went to a corner of the room and fell asleep with his head on his vest. The floor was littered with cigarette butts. An empty pack lay on the table, and I sat staring at it for quite a while. Then I took a scroll from an inner vest pocket, unsealed paper and ink, and set to write the first of many letters that would find its way to Konoha, long before my letter to Hinata was ready. I addressed the letter to Sakura. As Izuna's mentor, she had taken on all responsibility and would tell the parents. The memory of Izuna's death came up like a specter as I wrote, and I had to steady my hand as the brush flickered across the paper as not to make my writing even harder to read. She died bravely, fulfilling her duty as a medic neem to the very last moment. My hand cramped around the brush. We had no body for an appropriate farewell ceremony. All these people would feed the ground, and their spirits would wander, untouched by the deliverance of fire. Eventually I finished the letter and began another one. I did as many as I could before my sight became blurry, and I fell asleep. Once I woke because Shikamaru had started squirming, but I was too tired and closed my eyes, and was gone again a second later. When I woke up for real, snoring came from Shikamaru's corner. The sun was casting a golden bar into the room, shining on my arms which I had used as a pillow. It had been a strange dream. Full of violence and murder, but also of beauty and grace. I had seen many people in it. Some I knew, some I didn't. Hinata was there, and Izuna and Kiku. Somewhere Danzo lurked as well. As I stood and stretched, my mind wandered, trying to piece the dream together. I had fought in front of a waterfall. Hinata had been dancing there, but now the water was running red and boulders blocked most of it, damming it up. I stopped mid-stretch. How much did it take to reroute a waterfall? Or to make a dam explode? I lowered my arms, staring at Shikamaru in wonder. His faith that something would turn up had kept me from going to pieces yesterday. By now I should have gotten used to him being right, but it still kept amazing me when it happened. They said to think outside the box. I said screw that. A box was too small. And Uzumaki ought to think bigger. Thinking outside an entire country was more my style. I needed more troops, that much we had established yesterday. My salvation lay not in Danzo, however, but in Waterfall. The guerrilla efforts of their remaining shinobi kept Iwa on its toes. No one would dispute that Waterfall as a whole belonged to Iwa, though, since the fight there was coming to a slow and painful end. And a renewed, concentrated uprising was unlikely, as most of the resistance had split and spread around the country. All they had left was raiding convoys and being as much of a nuisance as they could. To that effect, Konoha provided them with weapons, food and information, hoping to keep the struggle alive for as long as possible. Could I convince them to help me? What were my options? I looked at Shikamaru still sitting asleep against the wall. This time I wouldn't go alone. I had the best mind in the elemental countries at my side. The best friend, too, come to think of it. I'd be an idiot not to take him with me. I threw on my vest and made to wake him up. The day was wasting away, and we had plans to make.